Coming up next on Two Cops, One Donut.
One of the things that I try to do is one, let them know I'm not judging them, that we all make mistakes, and that, this is this moment with them and whatever led them to being in the back of my patrol car does not define them as who they are as a human being. And by saying those things, that breaks down a lot of barriers. And a lot of times I'll just say, hey, tell me your story. How did you get to where you are right now? And just having that humanization to just get to their level and have a real life conversation. Um, I've gathered a lot of valuable information by the end of that conversation before we go to the jail. And the power of having a pack of smokes in your patrol car for you patrol guys out there and giving someone a cigarette, I can't tell you the amount of information that I've gotten from just having a pack of Marlboro Reds in my patrol car, a pack of Camels, and somebody one last smoke before they go into jail.
All right, welcome back. Two Cops, One Donut. I'm your host, Eric Levine, and today my guest is Chris Foreman out of Washington. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm a little uncomfortable. I'm back in the saddle again, and I have not been in the saddle for a month. I've been doing my military tour. I'm what's called an IMA reservist. So that's an individual mobilization augmentee. That's a non-traditional reservist, and basically I'm attached to an active duty unit versus being attached to a reserve unit. So when I go and play, want to be soldier in the Air Force, I am with guys that are doing it 365, 24/7 versus
Wow.
like the traditional reservists where they're all just like me. We have regular jobs, we do regular things, and then show up and play weekend warrior. So it's more fun, and people pay attention to you less because
Okay.
they're out there doing the real thing while I'm there just showing up and kind of like helping out where where they need help. So
Nice. Very cool.
yeah. But today we are going to have a little sip. What are you drinking today, sir?
I'm drinking some Woodford Reserve,
Mm.
which was in my dad's liquor cabinet, so
Oh, nice,
I
nice.
broke in there.
I am having some Smoke Wagon rye, malted rye, uh, right there out of Vegas. Everybody that listens to this podcast quite regularly knows that Smoke Wagon's my favorite brand of whiskey, and I didn't know I liked ryes. I bought this bottle because it was their brand, and I like all the other stuff I had from them. So I was like, let me try a rye, and now it turns out I really like them. So it
I
does
am a
give me a
rye fan as well. That is my go-to. So
yeah.
I haven't tried the Smoke Wagon yet. I'll have
Oh,
to look for that one.
yeah, it's good stuff, and it's becoming readily available more often in more places here in Texas. So that makes life better for me because it was hard to find, like really hard. So, and we were just talking a little bit offline. You're kind of a whiskey connoisseur, huh?
Yeah. So I started kind of a long story, but I talked my wife into getting like one of those 10 by 20 sheds, and that turned into kind of a man cave that turned into a whiskey saloon. And now I try to uh, partake in collecting different whiskeys and then have friends over and give tastings and hang out and
Oh yeah,
visit. So it's
tastings is where it's at. I used to be that way. I started. I was a craft beer guy,
okay.
and kind of went down that rabbit hole for a few years where I was aging beers and doing all that, and then having verticals is what they call it, where
Okay.
you test the different years that you've gone down the line of the same beer and seeing the difference in how they age and all that stuff. Nerd stuff. It was fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it for sure. But I just got tired of the beer game. Don't get me wrong. If I'm at a restaurant or something, they got some nice craft beer, I might try it out. But for the most part, and for my stomachs, I hate the fullness of beer. So I do
I
prefer.
know. And I feel as I've gotten older, I'm 45 now. I feel like that the beer consumption thing is definitely like, especially like trying to stay in shape, being on SWAT, stuff
Yes.
like that. Like
Yep.
it's harder and harder to keep that off around the midsection. So a nice
Yep.
whiskey is I feel like it can work that off a little bit easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm 40, and I'm same for me, man. I'm noticing everything is slowed down. So metabolism, run speed. I just did my PT test for the Air Force, and um my test score just slowly keeps dipping
Mm.
over the years. I scored like a 94 this time. The last time was a 96. The time before that was a 98.
Oh
The time
shoot.
before that was 100. So I'm just like, shit, I'm getting slow.
Yeah,
But
over the hump.
yeah, it is what it is. I'm still in the 90s. I'm not too upset because
Oh,
even,
that's
yeah.
nothing to be yeah, sad
But
about.
all right, brother. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. So, for those listening, now that we've already gone about 5 minutes in, and they're like, "What's this episode going to be about?" Narcotics, 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 narcotics. We're going to talk that game, and we'll get into some other stuff too. Combat first aid, um, a narcotics association. I didn't even know that they had associations for such thing. I mean, it makes sense, but I've never been in the narc world, so I didn't know about it. So I'm interested to find out. So if you're used to my format, first thing we're going to do is we're going to get to know Chris, and then we're going to get to know his job and what it takes to get where he got. And then we'll get into some little side stuff as we go. So I'm looking forward to it. Appreciate you being here, buddy.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on.
Not a problem. All right, Chris. So, life of service. You decided to be a cop. I need to know the background story. What led you to choose such a poorly chosen career field?
Yeah, so family business. My dad was local law enforcement. He did 12 years, two up in Washington, and then 10 down in Costa Mesa, California, or Costa Mesa PD, and then applied and got hired with the FBI. And
Oh,
the vast majority of my life, basically from kindergarten through high school, my dad was in the FBI and assigned to different offices in the Bay Area. And so one of those was he was in the police training unit. So I got to see, had some experiences. Actually, I had an internship right out of high school, or I got to go with him for a week and see him do a basic SWAT school. And, just being around, hearing his stories, and just felt like a calling to want to serve my community. And uh, grew up as a Christian, just wanting to serve and be there and essentially protect the poor and the weak and those that can't protect themselves, and be that person in between them and evil. And so yeah, I think probably since I was like junior high, I knew that was
okay.
something that I wanted to do. And my dad's advice, and I would, like you're gonna hear, my dad, I would say, is one of my heroes, a guy I still look up to this day. And his advice was, hey, go to college and get your 4-year degree. So if you want to go into the federal system, you have that option. Um, but I knew that I wanted to go into local law enforcement to start out, and then kind of see where.
To do
Uh,
real police work is what you,
yes,
yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yep.
dad. Yeah,
And
dad.
and the and my dad, the unique thing about, I think, his perspective that he shared with me was he was on fugitive task forces, and a lot of the guys he interacted with were guys from Oakland PD, Richmond PD, and so he really, and I think coming from local law enforcement, really understood the value of local law enforcement, especially getting into the community where they're trying to find fugitives, and the value of knowing guys that work those streets every day. And so that was one of the things that I feel like, I always appreciated that he, shared with me and respected, like the,
Yeah.
the job, no matter what level you're at, but the local.
So you knew at a young age. You're like me. My dad also law enforcement. He actually retired from the department I work for now. So
Okay.
I was stubborn. I kind of wanted to be a cop on my own. I didn't want to be at the department he was at. So I went the military route, became an Air Force cop, and then I was a cop up in Michigan. And then I actually applied for agencies all over the country, um, including his, because he's just like, just put in, we're making X amount of money. And I was like, holy shit, that's a lot of money for a
Yeah.
cop. And just so happened I got hired at his department first, and
Okay.
went through the process, and I was really close to going to Arizona. Arizona was doing a big hire out of Michigan, and also Florida. Florida was doing quite a big hire. So Texas won the race, and because I legitimately I would have went anywhere that was civil service and supported law enforcement. So that's basically what I was looking for, and where I'm at now pulled it off. But it sounds like you and I kind of similar boats. I knew real young, and I was kind of an asshole kid. Like I was a shithead. My dad was down in Texas, but I was up in Michigan with my mom,
Okay.
and I would buck the system pretty bad. I had a little rebellious streak in me, but deep down, if I'm going to be honest with myself, I always knew I was going to be a cop. I just tried to do just enough to not ruin that from my life growing up, and it worked out obviously. But I like what you've kind of touched on something that a lot of our guests from the three letter agencies in the federal system have all implied or said during interviews on here is that their job would be exponentially harder if it wasn't for the efforts that local law enforcement puts out there and basically gets the groundwork running for them because of that community relationship or just on the ground knowledge that if the FBI or whoever were to try to start from scratch, they would have a very hard uphill battle.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of the things I think I've learned over my time in law enforcement, especially getting into the narcotics, was the networking and establishing those relationships, all over the state, all over the Northwest, and just the value of having that resource of somebody you can call from that area and being like, hey man, this is what I got. I got a first name, or maybe you got a phone number, and next thing you know, they're like, yep, I know that cat. I've dealt with him, and this is where he lives, this is what kind of car he drives, blah blah blah. But yeah, I mean, it's in today's day and age, like we have to use every advantage that we can, especially when we're going after, narco traffickers. So, yeah, I've just always appreciated the value and the collaboration reaching across the aisle. And you always get those, guys that think they're a big deal because they're a three-letter agency. But my experience is that's definitely the minority. And for the majority of my experiences and my careers, it's everybody wants to work together, and they don't care who gets the credit. They just want that guy, put away.
Yeah,
So,
so you bring up a good educational point that we can talk about, so the public can kind of get an idea. Is no one really sets us down as law enforcement, as FBI or whatever, and says, okay, here are your connections. These are the people you need to talk to during these things. When you're doing an investigation, call this guy, call this guy, call this guy. We never get sat down like that. That training does not exist. You get that through experience. And, hopefully you have a good trainer. And for us that are investigators, I was a detective for 4 years. Um, it, you either make your connections on your own or you kind of get some hand me downs from people that train you or whatever. But for the most part, I think it would surprise the public to know that, like, I don't have call FBI for this, call, ICE for this, we don't have that. You got to find that shit on your own. And from me on the outside looking in, that would surprise me. I would think that these agencies talk regularly and they talk, share a bunch of information, but they don't. And you get ego, you get territorial, you get jurisdictional, you get all these different factors. This is where the TV drama kind of hypes it up a little bit, but it
hmm
exists, and
it
it's
does.
important for the public to know that you got lucky, your old man, local law enforcement and federal, and is able to shed that type of perspective. I got lucky too. My dad, he's still very much as an influence in my um policing career and guides me. And when I get stuck, I'll call him and say, hey, I'm trying to find. He's like, you tried doing this? I'm like, oh shit, no, I didn't think of that.
Yep.
But there's no training guide for this stuff.
No, there isn't. And I, kind of fast forwarding into the narcotics position that I'm currently in as the president of our state association. That's one of the biggest things when I get up in front of everybody at the start of our conference. I'm like, engage, network, you know, when you're in class and you're sitting there next to people, introduce yourself, find out where they work, where they live, exchange business cards, have beers with guys normally know or work with, because there is so much knowledge and value that are all there for a week together. And if and just over my years, like going to different states, just for example, one quick story. I'm sitting at a blackjack table in Reno, Nevada at the California Narcotics Officers Conference, which is the biggest conference in the West Coast for narc cops. And there's anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 cops, and we're sitting there playing blackjack, having a whiskey, and I start talking to the guy next to me. Hey, where you from? Oh, I'm down in, Orange County, California. Oh, cool. That's where I was born. Start talking with him a little bit more. Finds out I'm from Washington State. Next thing he's like, oh yeah, we got a case. We got a tracker on a car. It's in the Seattle area. I'm like, well, what area? Oh, it's in Kent, Washington. I'm like, oh, and he's like, yeah, we don't know anything about where it's parked. It's at some automotive shop. So I'm like, well, it just so happens one of my good buddies is in that unit that works local dope in Kent, and over, saying, double down or hit me or stay. I'm connecting my buddy with this guy and essentially giving him a resource and contact. And then sure enough, that chop shop, that automotive place is a chop shop that it's under investigation on. They're looking at, didn't know it had a um, net nexus, and then all of a sudden they're communicating and talking, and now he's got a local resource that he can call to get more information on his case. So it's just stuff like that yeah, like you said, they don't teach you that. That's just stuff that like you learn from experience. And so trying to pass that knowledge on, especially in new narcotics detectives, right away, so they can get that leg up and don't have to learn the hard way, is a big deal.
If you're law enforcement, stop and listen to me right now. If you're a police department that does not have an LPR system, Insight is offering the first 10 agencies, that means one agency apiece, gets one camera for free. You have to tell them that Two Cops, One Donut sent you. You heard me right. If you're a police agency that does not have an LPR system yet, or does have an LPR system, and you're not happy with the product you have, Insight is offering you a free camera. No strings attached, and they will install it. I have 10 to give out. Tell them Two Cops, One Donut sent you, or reach out to me and I will get you in contact. If you're a business owner or an HOA, please stop and listen to me right now. If you're just listening to the audio, do yourself a favor and watch the YouTube version of this episode to get a visual of what I'm about to tell you. I want to tell you guys about Insight LPR. It's a license plate reader. If your agency, community, or business is looking to invest in LPR to help solve and deter crime or to make your community safer, Insight LPR has my vote of confidence. I've met with their team. They know their LPRs, guys. They're the real deal. They bring over 75 years of collective experience to building LPR cameras and the software that supports communities across the country. The other thing I really like about this team is how much they listen to law enforcement. They understand the importance of working together with law enforcement and getting their input as they build and innovate products and their service to match the needs of law enforcement. In other words, when I complain or have suggestions to make their damn camera better, they actually do it. The Insight LPR team is extremely passionate and takes pride in their product development, which makes their cameras some of the most durable cameras in the market. For the gear nerds out there, what that means is this stuff's made of military grade aluminum and is nitrogen purged, whatever that means. This design makes the cameras rugged and able to withstand harsh weather elements. Here's the big selling point for me. Their nighttime scan accuracy is higher than most of the leading competitors. In my opinion, this is what sets them apart. As we know, the majority of crimes occur at night, so it's critical to have high scan accuracy at night. Insight's cameras check the box with the nighttime plate read accuracy greater than 96%. 96%, guys. That's pretty freaking high. If your community is looking to invest in LPR technology, reach out to one of their experts today, or reach out to me. Tell them Two Cops, One Donut sent you. Yeah, and the technology has come such a long way that we as cops, we don't really have an excuse to be so nodal or so, siloed. And that seems to be a big issue and has been a big issue with police for a long time, just being siloed. And I don't think it's intentional. It's just, the channels are very narrow to reach out, to other places. Because we inevitably, what do? I'll Google. All right, what's the agency adjacent that I'm looking for? Oh, it's Burleson. All right, Burleson PD, and then you start looking down the line. All right, I'm kind of looking for their investigations division. Oh, they don't have that listed. They just have a generic number. So now I got to call their dispatch center and say, hey, I'm Detective such and such. I'm trying to reach this. Can you guys connect me? And then they get you connected. And that's the trouble we run into as cops. But today, the technology is getting so good. We have license plate readers. So that's huge for narcotics. When you're tracking a vehicle and you use a system like Flock or you use a system like Insight or any of these other LPR companies, those are only two big ones I really know about. You can find out through another agency's LPR. Hey, we got this guy, we're tracking him on ours, and we see that he is, also hitting your LPRs over in your city because we can share that information now. So now that narrow channel is starting to open up a little bit wider, and we can call local law enforcement for that area. Hey, we're tracking this guy. Can you add him to your LPR? And they will start tracking them, and they'll give you updates, or they'll go knock them down for you if that's what you're looking for, or they can just go keep eyes on stuff like that. So now we have a reach where we can start reaching out. And then there's other companies, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with this one. There's a company out there called Peregrine,
Hmm,
and
haven't
I
heard of it.
okay, so I started digging into this company. I was kind of interested. I was like, let me look into this one. Another one called Nice, NICE, similar. So I started digging into these two companies, and basically what they do is all of your information. Let's say you've got your narc intelligence group, you've got Fusion, you've got your basic report writing system, RMS, um, your 911 dispatch center, you've got ID where they confirm your warrants and stuff like that. You've got the jail paperwork. So you got all these different things, right? Um, and your narc division and your vice division and what other specialized units you have. All of these people have their own information that they keep on the city computer, right? Well, one of the problems we have internally is like if I find John Doe and he's a suspect in my case, I don't know much about him. All I really have to go on is what I can find in the report writing system. Or if I know somebody in Vice or if I know somebody in gang, somebody that's dealt with them before. And I'll call them up and say, "Hey, what do you got on this, John Doe?" And they'll say, "Oh, we've got this file on him." Okay, cool. Well, now you got to hope they send you the information you're looking for. They might keep it tight-lipped. You never know. Um, homicide really does that, which I understand why, case credibility and integrity. But with these programs, this Peregrine, like it takes everything you have, and if you type in John Doe, it breaks it down. Here they are, da 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 da, and it gives you all the information from all of these elements that it puts it into. And if I work from my department and you see that your guy is in my city and we both have this program, I can share with you all the information I have just like that. Well, everything is fucking crazy. So I see these new programs that are out there and the ability to share information on, problematic people. And I just, the solve rates are going to go through the roof. Mark my word. They're going to make a crappy detective look like Sherlock Holmes.
Oh yeah. No,
So,
we use a system from what you're describing, is very similar to that. It's called WISN, Western States Information Network.
okay.
But like we enter in, it might be the guy's moniker, his street name, phone number, license plate, car, and then essentially, if someone else is running a case and they search that phone number or they search a license plate through that system, and it connects, then it automatically lets you know and the other person know that entered in that information and gets you directly in touch with each other. So then you can start sharing, and it prevents blue on blue and investigations going into the same place from different entities. And then especially with UC work, but I can't tell you the amount of times that I've called in to do a deconfliction and boom, I get a hit, and all of a sudden I'm, you know 2 minutes later talking to a detective that's either already put that cat in jail and is a prior case from years back, but has all the information that he can send me, or a guy that's like, yeah, we know that guy, we know he's dealing dope, but we haven't been able to get into him, and now we have a CI, or they can, and then we're able to make that case with their help, and then a lot of times it just ends up that we're utilizing them to help us with surveillance and putting on trackers and all that. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great resource.
Can you explain to those listening what exactly deconfliction is? Because that's a common term we use in police work, but not a lot of people understand what that means.
Sure. So if I'm doing a case, let's say, and I've got a target identified, and I know him to be, like I said, maybe I just know a street name, and his name's Demon, and Demon is a Hispanic male, and I know his address. Maybe I know a car that he drives, but I don't have a plate. I enter all that in when I'm going to do so. So we're going to do an investigation. So we're going to go out and we're going to do a buy walk. So we're going to go out and we're going to buy drugs using a confidential informant. from that person, and I'm going to enter in all the information that I have at the time. And then if that street name, if that address, if that car, if that phone number, any of that hits through the Deconfliction network, and this is all over the West Coast from California all the way up to Washington, Alaska, Hawaii, um, it will automatically call us back from the watch center and say, hey, we have either a hit because you're doing an operation in an area where another agency has an operation going that's a block away, or is at the Target parking lot and you're doing it at the 76 gas station, for example. So what it does is it, one, gets you in touch with any other entities that are working at that same time in your location. And then if for some reason you're entering in a target that's already been identified and is already an ongoing investigation, it prevents both essentially doing two independent investigations where all of a sudden, like, hey, it's time to hit your search warrant after you've done your investigation, and boom, someone else is there the day before, or you hit it and then someone else calls and is like, hey, we had a case on this guy and you guys stepped on our toes. So it's preventing, first and foremost, blue on blue. So any type of situation where cops are taking down other cops, and that has happened historically throughout the country, and so it prevents that from happening. So it's a safety thing, but then it also is doing that networking piece of making sure that if other cases are going, that you're getting connected with those other detectives and giving you an opportunity to share that information.
Yep, yep. It's deconfliction's important, especially in narcotics world.
Oof.
Me, I did property crimes for quite a while. We do buy busts and stuff like that, buybacks, whatever. And you're always doing deconfliction. You don't want to start messing with somebody else's bigger investigation, especially when it's property crimes. It's not homicide. It's not, you know, typically it's not gang related. Sometimes it is. But you don't want to screw up somebody else's investigation on them, especially if they have a bigger case going on them. When all I'm doing is getting like a, state jail felony versus second second degree felony, whatever it is that they got going on. So deconfliction is important. You can also combine forces, which is nice. You can get more resources towards somebody that you didn't otherwise have because you didn't know other people were looking into them. And there's all sorts of deconfliction out there. Even in the property crimes world, there's a program called Leads Online where you're entering in property and you're seeing stuff through pawn shops and things of that nature, and you'll see somebody else is following the same suspect that you're following, is pawning stuff, and then you can hit them up. Oh, have you seen my guy? I'm looking for this type of property he sold, and then the next thing you know, you got another lead, another follow, and more resources to go towards your case, which is nice. So deconfliction, you guys are going to hear that a lot on, especially if we're talking narcotics, because they have to deconflict everything because it is a huge safety risk. A lot of officers have been hurt, or worse, and even suspects. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but we don't want our suspects getting hurt either. That just creates a big headache for us, and it ain't worth it. So I want to go back a little bit though, sir. You do your, we've got that you've been a cop 20 plus years. Um, everybody's got to start in patrol or at the bottom, wherever it is you're at. If you're a sheriff, you usually start in the jails. If you're a city cop, you start in patrol. FBI, I'm assuming you just sit and watch people investigate so you can learn how to invest. I don't know how that works over there, but where did you start and what was the catalyst for narcotics?
Yeah, so I think, one, just because I know you have listeners who are wanting to get into law enforcement, it took me 2.5 years of testing before I actually got hired by the sheriff's office that I work for in Eastern Washington. And I tested. I went to college over in Seattle, and I tested with Seattle PD, King County, which would be two of the biggest agencies in the state. I actually went down and tested with LAPD at one point. Like, I was just trying to get on anywhere I could. And at the time, and this is dating myself, but this was early 2000s. I mean, I was competing against 800 other candidates. I mean, it's a totally different world now. And, most law enforcement, as far as I know, everywhere in the country is scrambling to find candidates. But when I was
Yep.
testing, it was a very competitive environment. And I was essentially told, hey, you're 21, 22 years old. You have no life experience. Like, go do something else and then come back. So um, I just essentially was willing to go anywhere to to follow my calling and what I would say has been my dream to be in law enforcement. So I get hired um, and start out on patrol. So I work for a county that's 2,900 square miles. Um, we have 8 to 9 deputies, or I should say 7 deputies, a corporal, and a sergeant covering that area. Primary rural county. We have a lot of,
Shit.
yeah, we're backup can be 20 to 30 minutes away. And
That's why
so,
I like being a city cop.
yeah, well, it's different perspectives, right? I mean, and one of
Mm,
the things that I actually am very grateful for was you had to learn how to talk to people and you had to learn how to, it's the coin term de-escalate, but you had to figure out how to establish rapport and you had to figure out how to basically delay and wait for your backup to show up. And so you realize how to get rapport building going, how to get the gift of gab, how to just find something in common that you could talk to someone with for a while before the cavalry showed up to help you out. But
hold on. You're
yeah,
you're my era, okay?
okay,
And you
yeah,
said it. You said de-escalation is the hot term. I wrote it down, the answer of what I'm about to ask you, so
yeah.
nobody knows I'm not cheating. What did we call it when we got into police work? It wasn't called de-escalation. What was it called?
Oh man,
Come on,
I'm.
you know this.
I mean, I'm just saying.
When we would talk people down, the whole gift of gab using. I put you on the spot, so now you're gonna
Yeah, I mean,
you're
I
gonna
mean, I just what comes to mind is like rapport building, but just
come
getting.
on.
Um,
Think of karate.
oh, verbal judo.
There we go.
Yes, verbal judo. Yes,
Yes, yeah.
totally. No,
Yeah.
it had to take me a minute for you to give me that hint, but no, totally verbal judo. Yep.
Yeah, they just repackaged it, called it a new name,
Hmm.
and now people are making a killing off of we're teaching de-escalation classes. No, you're not. You're teaching verbal judo, which they've done since the 70s. And before that, it was because they actually knew everybody in their community.
Right.
That's a
Yep.
whole other element to policing that nobody considers is that cops in the communities they work, they didn't grow up in much anymore.
Yeah.
Now people, it is. It's a lot easier for people and more people move than they ever have at any time in their life. So, like me, I'm definitely an implant, here in Texas. So that's things to consider. But sorry, I digress. I just you said the coined term of
Oh yeah.
de-escalation, and I'm like,
Oh, I know.
so funny how we've just been brainwashed into something that was it's not a it wasn't a problem. We were already cops. Trust me, people, if you're listening, cops, for the most part, I won't say that there aren't those outliers that are looking for a fight. They're there and they weed themselves out eventually. But for the most part, none of us want to get in a fight at all. If I can use my words, that's what I'm going to try to do. And before we were calling it de escalation, cops were calling it verbal judo. And they're some of the best in the world when it comes to doing that stuff. So when their words do fail, like shit's hit the fan, or they had a bad day. Some cops just have bad days and somebody gets under their skin and that's it.
Yeah. And yeah, no, I had a guy that kind of took me under his wing when I first got in. He's old school, retired now. And I mean, it was pure sport for him to get consent searches to talk his way into houses to look for warrants. He loved hunting warrants and he would just, I mean, he just sit there and he wasn't afraid to, just talk to people and establish that rapport building and then, work his way into getting that consent. But like I saw his tactics and I sat there, as his cover officer and just listened over the years and was able to steal a lot of his stuff that he would do and it's obviously been beneficial in my own career. But yeah, I mean it is a true art and it's like to me it's fun. It's just like,
Yeah.
hey, can I change this person's mind basically from him
Yep.
saying hell no you're not looking into my car to like oh yeah hey go ahead I'll sign this consent form and yeah have at it
Yeah.
so it's just it's the Jedi mind tricks that you get over time from a lot of failure but
Yeah.
you figure out
And
your niche
it's
and hit
crazy
it.
when you tell people that I will tell people ahead of time, I'm like, not only am I going to search, they're gonna let me search, and then they're gonna thank me when I arrest them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Watch. And sure as shit, I will go through all the steps. I'll get consent to search. We will search. I will find the gun. I will find the property, whatever it is. And then at the end, they'll thank me. And
Yep.
people are like, there's no way they're thanking you. I'm like, I watch. I promise you. I will treat them with such respect and dignity that at the end of it, hey man, this is just business. You'll get this taken care of. And, I appreciate it, officer. Thank you for being, cool. And that's just how it is. You
Yeah.
do. And cops, I'm telling you, the good ones, they are not looking to get into any shit. They don't want to get in a fight. They don't want to do any of that stuff because it just causes more headache than it's worth in
Oh
the
yeah.
end.
Especially if you can talk someone into cuffs
Yeah.
that is hell bent on fighting, and you can at the end of the day talk them into turning around and putting their hands behind their back. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that's
I'm not looking to
that's a
get my
win.
ass kicked at all.
Right. Yep.
I, I don't like getting in fights. I don't want to be in a fight. I accept that the chances are there, but if I can use my words, I'm gonna do that. But
Yep.
all right, so you take 2 years to get finally into where you're at, and you're going through the steps of a rookie. What triggered the narcotics fetish?
So, and this is, I mean, I'm going to talk Washington law, which is going to blow most people's minds because our state is, there's no other way to say it. It's fucked up. We are very limited in what, especially right now, and we can talk about that later, where we're at as far as drug law enforcement. But, I was again under that generation where, before Arizona v. Gant, like, anybody I arrested for suspended license, I was searching their car, I was finding dope, guns, all the fun stuff. I mean, and so I was very proactive, and I worked in one of our kind of our smaller contract cities that's in our county, and I got to know, who's who in the zoo. I knew who the players were, who the guys that, um, were, and meth was the big drug early on in my career, but I knew who all the tweakers were and what they drove and who was suspended. And I started just working that angle, and, turning informants. And at first, some of those informants I was handing over to our drug task force. But that was just the niche in law enforcement that I loved. And, I loved blacking out at night, sitting on houses,
So you were doing this as a patrol officer.
yep, yep.
Okay.
And the good thing about like the community that I work and live in is we're not a really busy area as far as calls for service. So, the way I was taught and trained was, hey, be proactive, go out and find it. And that's always been something that to this day I still love, going out and looking for crime and looking for,
Now that
you
is a
know,
debatable hot topic
mm,
for a lot of people.
oh yeah.
Um, not just okay. So it's
Yeah.
education time.
So yeah, so we can go there. But yeah, so was really, I just enjoyed that niche of law enforcement. So I had some opportunities to test, and I got promoted to corporal pretty early on in my career. And then I tested for sergeant, and the idea was to go through the process, learn what the assessment center was like, all the different things. And that was something my dad had said, hey, take the test so you've got one under your belt. And then when you're, you know, the next go around, you'll be that much more prepared. Well, I tested as soon as I was eligible at 5 years, and I tested number one. So I got promoted to sergeant with five
Okay.
years on, which, I'm not saying that that's the norm or the right thing, but I was given an opportunity, and I got promoted.
What were the
Uh,
duties of a corporal? Like where I am at, a corporal is either a detective or they're like in the field with patrol.
Yeah, so our corporals in our agency are essentially a relief supervisor. So again, thinking about the dynamics of a county where it's 2,900 square miles and there's 7, 8 of you, it's very rare that a sergeant's gonna be able to show up on every hot call. And so that corporal is essentially a relief supervisor and spread out in a different area, ideally than where the sergeant is. And so they're there as a resource, and then they can show up on a call that maybe the sergeant would take an hour to get to.
Okay.
And then when the sergeant's off, they're the relief supervisor, but they can, they can work the schedule, they can, grant days off. But yeah, they're essentially
Were
the
they
the
shagging calls
backup.
too?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and and again, like a lot of times, eh, for me as a patrol sergeant and or a corporal, if someone's off on vacation or sick, I'm filling in that area. So I'm not only handling calls, but then I'm trying to supervise as well. So that's just kind of the reality of, the size of our department, being a medium size for Washington State, which is around 60-ish commissioned, and having that many folks on the road and just plugging holes sometimes when guys are off. So anyway, all to say is I got promoted to sergeant, worked a couple years of grave shift, then got bumped to days by someone more senior, and then the position opened at our drug task force, and they needed a unit supervisor. And so, being again, my niche on the patrol level, and working, drug cases, really just at the minute level and then handing a lot of that off to our detectives that were in the task forces. I was able to, go in there, and it was a steep learning curve. But one thing that was really, I think, unique and very fortunate for me was when I came in, we had two senior detectives that had been working dope for at least over 10 years at that point. It might have even been like 12. And they allowed me to work some cases during the first year as the unit supervisor. So I was able to run informants, I was able to go out and do buys, and I was able to do the investigations because they recognize the value of the supervisor has to know what the detectives are doing on a daily basis and appreciate the nuances of dope work because there's so much that is just you're in a gray environment. It's not black and white. One day your target that you've been working a case on for 6 months, the next day is your informant. And now you're working collaboratively with him up the chain to his supplier. So it's a very unique niche, and I loved every second of it. But at the same time, um, it's a steep learning curve and it's different than obviously patrol. And you're working on doper time, you're working with informants that are drug addicts themselves, that have never had a job or got fired from their jobs because of um, their addiction to whatever drug they're using. They don't set alarm clocks. They don't have a schedule. And not only is the informant like that, but the guy that you're trying to make a case on is like that. So you're sitting around on surveillance for 2 to 3 hours, calling the guy, he's ghosting you, his phone's dead, all the different things. And so you work around, the realities of doper time and working around people that are not responsible, which most people in law enforcement that you work with, I would say to get hired, you got to be pretty responsible and have a pretty good work ethic. And so there's a lot of just nuances that I was able to gather from these guys that had been doing it for a really long time and kind of again took me under their wing. And then I was able to be in that position as our unit supervisor for 7 years. So I had multiple detectives that rotated through. And that's something too that kind of depends on every task force is a little bit different, but some of it's a rotation, some of it's in there as long as you want to be, or you promote out, or you screw up and then you're rotated out. But you get the unique experience of having to train guys that are coming in like myself off of patrol, getting them up to speed. And, for most guys, it's a 3-year process to get them comfortable and running their own cases. And then like for my agency, it's a 5-year rotation. And then about that time that they're hitting their stride and really, killing it is about the time it's time to rotate out and then you start the process all over again. So, I see it both ways, and I feel very fortunate that I was able to be in there as long as I was, which was 7 years, which was one of the longer stints of the unit supervisor in our drug task force. Um, but that experience is what led me into getting involved in our state association that I'm now the president of, and just have continued to just that niche of law enforcement that I really enjoy and am drawn to, because kind of going into a more broader spectrum is that so much of what happens in the drug world affects the rest of the community with our thefts, our theft rings, our guns being stolen, car prowls, burglaries. Um, a lot of that is motivated by drugs and paying off drug dealers or feeding their habit. And so there's just a lot of it just takes you in a lot of different directions. And for me, that's been always that really stimulating piece of law enforcement that's kept me interested and keep ultimately keeping my community safe and keeping drugs out of my community. But figuring out that um, conundrum of, okay, I know a guy, I know this guy, I know he's dealing dope. How are we going to make a case on this guy, and how are we going to make the best case that we can? We're going to send this guy to prison for 10 to 15 years so he's out of our community. And then as soon as that guy's gone, then the next guy steps up, and then we got to figure out how we're going to take that guy out. So it probably sounds really challenging, but at the same time, it's very rewarding. And it's just that stimulation of uh, how to outsmart another human being at the end of the day to win.
Yeah, you made a good correlation. Because me being on the other side of the same house, property crimes, the majority of my suspects are dopers trying to feed a habit, for the most part, and you start to find that out, and now I'm constantly every other day it's like calling the narc group and, hey guys, I'm trying to find this dude. This is his MO. He likes copper. He likes hitting these rooftop AC units. I got him selling some copper over here, but he was using a fictitious name. Do you guys know who he is? Oh, that's such and such. He likes to crash over at this trap house and this trap house, and you you start to see where they lay their head down, in the daytime, because they're vampires. When we talk about doper time, they
Oh yeah,
they don't like the sun. That's
no.
for sure. So, now when you got started into the dope game, you were at the patrol level. So this is a kind of for those officers out there, kind of wondering how to dip your toes in the water. It's a matter of taking advantage of your downtime when you aren't running call to call. If it depends on the type of place you're in, if you got time to be proactive, you get a hold of your narc experts at your department, whether you have a narcotics group team, whatever it is, or somebody that's just really good at catching dope, and you find out, like, where are the dope houses located in my location. Now you may be screwed. Maybe your beat doesn't have any dope houses. I would argue that there's dope houses in every beat, but maybe you don't have any that are known, and you gotta find them. You gotta find out who's got dope houses that you can set up on, and that's the simplest way to get started, in my opinion. Is you look for a location that's got open air drug deals, or you look for a house that people just keep stopping by for 5 minutes and leaving, but it's a different car every time, and then you go find a traffic stop on that car, and then you start asking questions, and then you start digging, and that's how I started learning dope. I never went to a narcotics team, but you know how it is. You start getting really good at police. Well, the evolution for myself was you get out there, you're on your own when you get cut loose, and the first thing we all like to do, just to kind of not when we're not shagging calls, is traffic stops. So pull a car over, then you start talking, and you learn that you can start digging a little bit. You can start asking weird questions and finding things out that you didn't think you'd find out, and then it just kind of progresses naturally, I think, into narcotics. Is that how it worked for you?
Yeah, and I think like just other cops that are out there working patrol, if you have a good relationship with your drug unit, and I think there's some things that are nuanced and different, and some things that are universal, right? I think the vast majority of narcotics units are getting tips from the public, and it's like, hey, there's a lot of traffic going on at this house. And I will tell you, my own experience is we don't have time to even mess with those because we're running our cases. We've already got our informants. We already got, and every once in a while, yeah, it'll be a place that maybe we've already got a case going on. But the others, it's just like, hey, the neighborhood's pissed and they want something done, and we don't have time to deal with it. So if you get in with your detectives and you're trusted, and you're not a guy that's going to go to coffee and blab about it in the public or with other guys, but you keep that information to yourself and establish that reputation, those guys will give you those locations. And then you can go out and start messing with those and get into stuff. I mean, that's what I did. And again, I when I did have those contacts with the guys in that unit before I got in there, when they told me stuff, I kept it to myself and I utilized it. And then, in return, I would eventually be feeding them informants that they would then roll with. And so it was a relationship where, I was able to establish kind of my street cred from going out and, one being someone that unit could trust to do stuff. And then they'd start including me on pulling cars over and identifying guys, um, and then doing helping on takedowns to then, eventually me being in that task force position and taking those tips, there were certain guys that I would reach out to and be like, "Hey, here's one for you. Let me know if you get into anything. We'll come out and help you out, or if you have any questions, and we can take it over if you feel like you get in over your head." But I think like if those the listeners out there, if you want to get into that, establish so again, it's that networking and engaging with that niche of law enforcement, and there's stuff in every community. You just got to know where to look.
Yeah. Um, it goes into, you kind of touched on a good point when it comes to investing into the relationships with your CIs. People don't understand, especially other officers, like that prostitute that you're sarcastic with on a call because you feel some sort of way about their lifestyle and their choices or whatever it is. Prostitutes are the best form of information I've ever got. Some of the best relationships I've had. I've got some of them that still call me to this day, and I haven't worked with them in that capacity, um, in a law enforcement capacity. For all you sickos out there, like I bet you do got a relationship with the prostitutes.
Yeah.
Um, so, I'll still get calls from them and they're like, "Hey, such and such just bragging about a big score they had over here," and I'm like, "What? Really? Okay, well, like we had a theft of like $400,000 worth of copper." I was like, "That's a big ass hit." Well, I
Yeah.
was I was lost, and I basically did everything, but I just pended the case because I didn't have any leads. I had no video, I had no nothing, and I just kind of forgot about it. And then I got hit up by one of these people that I've treated great. I took the time to, anytime they did help me, whether it was getting them a carton of cigarettes, going and some people are like, "Damn, that's a big investment." Like, yeah, that's what one of the little things cops do that people don't realize. We go out and spend our own money to help solve some of these big ass cases because it's simpler and we're invested into the community and what we do. So Chris, you tell me, how many times have you reached in your own pocket in your career and paid for a meal for your CI or whatever it is because they're coming down, they're hungry, all that stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think like one of the things that I've always tried to do, and again started this in patrol, but really got into it working with informants in the drug task force was I break down the barrier right away. And one of the things that's unique about drug task force work is you're not in uniform. And there is a barrier there that you have to break through that's a little bit tougher when you're in uniform, which is, you're in plain clothes and you're talking to someone, right? Because they're looking at you and they're seeing the uniform and they're equating that to whatever past experiences or their fears or whatever else versus if I'm just a guy dressed in normal clothes. But having said that, like I always tried to, and I had the luxury of sometimes a jail ride in my county is an hour to the jail. So I have a lot of time to talk and establish that rapport. But one of the things that I try to do is one, let them know I'm not judging them, that we all make mistakes, and that, this moment with them and whatever led them to being in the back of my patrol car does not define them as who they are as a human being. And by saying those things, that breaks down a lot of barriers. And a lot of times I'll just say, hey, tell me your story. How did you get to where you are right now? And just having that humanization to just get to their level and have a real life conversation. Um, I've gathered a lot of valuable information by the end of that conversation before we go to the jail. And the power of having a pack of smokes in your patrol car for you patrol guys out there and giving someone a cigarette, I can't tell you the amount of information that I've gotten from just having a pack of Marlboro Reds in my patrol car, a pack of Camels, and somebody one last smoke before they go into jail. So, but again, it's like, having that real, hey, I'm not judging you, I'm not looking down on you, I've made mistakes in my own life, like I have, friends and family that have had addiction issues that I've seen through, so I can relate to what they're going through, and making it that I'm just not, some uniform that's got a wall up, but like I be real with people, and that has served me well in, being able to establish those relationships and getting information out that otherwise there's no way would have happened, that have led to, solving cases, or getting into, you know targets that norm we wouldn't have gotten into otherwise. And then I think that's something too, where if you're a more experienced officer, that you share that information and get that with your newer folks, and passing that down the line as part of your legacy in law enforcement.
Yeah, it's important for our senior guys to, and it's hard to get them to engage sometimes. Burnout's a real thing. Um, some of them just, they're not, they want you to learn on your own. But I am, I'm of the opinion, like, if I can save you the trouble of going through some of the BS I had to go through, getting to where I'm at, I will try to save you the headache. So it's an uphill battle as a supervisor now, because I just promoted. So I'm, yeah, I'm a fucking supervisor, which is crazy. Um, still got the immaturity of a 12-year-old. I think farts and burps are funny still. So it's for me, I'm looking at these guys and I'm like, if I can help you cut corners, have shortcuts in your career in any way, I'm going to help you do that, because that is invaluable information that you're either going to have to learn from getting burned, or somebody's going to tell you and save you the trouble. Now, the problem being is getting some of the crusty vets and convincing them, hey, take the new kid under your wing. Go, they're not an FTO, they're not anything, but I'm just like, hey, he wants to learn dope. Go teach him dope. Hey, he wants to learn, how to do DWIs. He's real passionate about that. I'm all about reinforcing a newer officer's passion, and helping them, you know, shape that. Because it may be like me. I thought I kind of liked narcotics and all that stuff, and going down that rabbit hole. I was thinking about getting on our narc group and all that stuff, and then I just something in it. I kind of I got it out of my system. I don't know what it was, and I just like, I want to try something different. So for me, it wasn't a thing for me, but it's a hard thing to do for us as cops to open our mouths to either one, try to help another officer, try to save them going through the pains that we went through, because not everybody's receptive to taking advice either. Have you run into that a lot, like trying to give advice when it wasn't wanted?
I feel like the culture of our agency and kind of the surrounding agency is, I mean, you have the universal of like guys talking shit at
Oh yeah,
coffee about other guys behind their backs,
for
and
sure.
that's something that I've really tried to be counterculture to, of like, hey, like if you got a problem with that guy, like go talk to him, because
Yeah,
if you don't talk to him about it, he's never going to change, and we're going to be sitting here 10 years from now and you're going to be talking the same shit, telling the same stories about that dude. But if you can go talk to that guy, so like I really try to preach like, hey, let's get over our own egos, let's have some humility, and we have to work with our brothers and sisters. So like if there's a hard conversation that needs to be had, or you need to debrief a call that didn't go well, that you aren't happy with, like you need to go do that. But like that's one of the things that I've really, and I've had the unique perspective of a sergeant, and then I was a chief running half of our department for 14 months, and now I'm back as a sergeant again. And that's something that I really try to pass on to the younger agency, because when I came into our department, I mean, while I was on FTO, my FTOs were talking shit about everybody on the department before I even had a chance to work with people. So it was like I was already tainted before I even had the opportunity to give someone a fair shake. And that's kind of always been stuck in the back of my head that I tell people is like, hey, you might hear something about somebody, but but come to your own conclusions and your own opinions. Don't rely on someone else because it might not be right. It might be off. It might be biased. Um, so having said all that on the negative side, on the positive side, I will say that I have had I think the people again that mentored me, that shared with me stuff, took me under their wing, I have appreciated. And then I feel like and again, it's the delivery, right? It's the same thing
Yeah.
with the rapport building with the informants. It's how you approach it. It's how you come across it. But at the end of the day, if I'm like, hey, I want to. Why I'm sharing this with you is I'm seeing something that could be concerning, and I just want you to be better. And you're my backup, or I'm your backup, and I want to have a good working relationship with you. And we're humans, right? Sometimes we have off days at work. We got other shit on our head, on our mind, stuff on the home front or finances or whatever else. And sometimes you just have a bad day, and you got to be able to, one, work through that. It, and two, be able to be a patrol officer that is respected enough that when you show up on a call, guys are going, oh shit, it's Chris Foreman again. He's gonna fuck this up. And so
Yeah.
so like I've always tried to share, one, hey, if I'm coming and talking to you, it's because I love you and I care for you. It's not because I have it out for you, because we should all be trying to make each other better out here in this profession and representing law enforcement to the best of our abilities. Now, having said that, like I'm a big guy of find your niche. What's your niche? Like, you
Yeah.
want to be a warrants guy, you want to be a community service guy and do foot patrol and talk to business owners, you want to be a traffic guy, you want to be a narc guy. Only thing I don't want you to be is a lazy guy, because I want you to earn your money. And however you do that is fine. But if you're going to sit at coffee for 2 hours and go hide and ditch calls, or not be the guy to answer up on calls when I've already answered two, those are the guys that, I'm like, that's not going to fly with me. I'm going to call you out on it, but I'm going to call you out directly. I'm not going to talk shit about you behind your back. I'm going to go directly to you, and I'm going to tell you straight up, like, hey, this is not going to fly. Like, you got to handle your load of calls, and you need to figure out what you're going to do if we're not busy. Because sitting around doing nothing is the community demands too much of us to just think that you can sit around and do nothing and collect a paycheck. That's my perspective.
Yeah. We have, so being a city cop where I'm at, um, you know, 2,000 cops ish. And, when you sit in the patrol car, you're usually sitting around, 10 to 15 calls holding as soon as you sit down. So you're going to call the call a lot and all that stuff. So, um, we kind of have a 3-step thing. I've noticed, and it's an informal, form of making sure people are earning their paycheck, so to speak. And typically, you use team peer pressure. That's the first level. They'll start saying stuff to
Oh
you,
yeah. Yep.
or a little shit talking amongst the roll call,
Hmm.
and they'll do it playfully. And then the next level is somebody's calling you out on the radio. Hey, that's your beat. You're gonna shag a call on your beat tonight. Somebody will make a sarcastic comment,
Hmm.
either over the air or through the MDCs. And then the next level is Sarge says something in roll call.
Yeah.
And when Sarge says something in roll call, it's gotten bad. Um, but that's kind of the 3-level process. But I would assume, this is an assumption, fully admit, the shit talking, it can probably be a little worse at a smaller department, just because of the lack of bodies. If you're working your area all by yourself for hours, days, months, weeks at a time, whatever it is, you can go a long while without seeing anybody. But you work at a place like where I'm at, and there's no escaping it. And your give a shit really has to be turned off for you to not give in to those pressures at work. And love them or hate them, I believe in them. I'm a believer in that type of system, because, like you said, at the end of the day, it's because I want my team to get along. I want my team to care. And by you not handling up, you're basically telling the team that you don't give a shit about them.
Yep.
You're only looking out for yourself.
Yep.
So it's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, but Is what it
No,
is.
I just went through some leadership training, and one of the core things was, are you looking inward or are you looking outward? That's the first question to ask yourself. Is it all about me, or is it about others? And so, it can be phrased a bunch of different ways, but I think it's been interesting, because we all have different perspectives, we all have different life experiences, and my 20 years at my one agency has, I would say, and all things considered, and the amount of cops that I've talked to over my 20 years, we have it pretty good. But we have a lot of downtime, which can lead to a lot of coffee talk, which is what I
Yep.
call it. But a lot of time, a guy's sitting around complaining or talking shit, and then we have laterals that come in from West Side agencies who are on your perspective, who are running call to call. There's 10 to 15 calls on the screen, and they're like, dude, we're so busy, we didn't have time to sit around and talk shit because
Yeah.
we're working, we're doing work. And so I think that's where I try to remind guys, like, hey, you know, we need to, one, remember, we're pretty fortunate. We have it pretty good. We get paid pretty well for the amount of work that we actually do in a 12-hour day, because we average about 2 calls in a 12-hour period. And the rest of that time is free to do what you want to do. And
Proactive,
so,
baby. Man, I
yeah,
wish I had that type
exactly.
of our
Yeah,
guys where I'm at, they would kill for that type of proactive time.
yeah,
They
yep,
they want they dying for it, but they just know like if it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you ain't getting
yeah.
it. Maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday you'll get some proactive time, but
And that's where I try to share guys too. Like, you're fortunate, right? You can do follow up on calls that you're interested in. You can write search warrants. You can do things that, with the pace of calls that we have, you get more experience to prepare you for narcs or detectives or whatever else, because you have that time to do that follow up,
yeah.
to go to that business, or contact that bank and directly, and do some of that stuff that normally would just be handed off for detectives. But because
Yep.
we're not as busy, you're more well rounded, I feel like, if you want to put in the time and
Absolutely.
effort.
I agree 100%. I try to me being from a smaller department going into where I'm at now, you did everything. You
Yeah,
you were your own detective. You did follow up on your case. You did all that shit. And then going to a big city, you don't you grab the information and hopefully you do a good job of information gathering and you pass it on to the detective and it's the detective's job to follow up and do all the little things that you know, when I came, I thought I was being lazy. Like, legitimately, when I first got there and I got cut loose in patrol, I'm like, well, there's a gas station down there. I know they probably got video cameras that may have my guy, my suspect. I'll go down there and they're like, no, 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 no. My FTO. No, 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 no,
yeah,
no, no,
yeah,
no. No. That's the detective's job. We don't do that. There's call
yeah,
holding. I'm like, ah, I'm like, but it's literally right there. I could save
yeah,
him so
yeah,
much time. And then me as a detective, I'm looking, I'm like, damn, I wish there was more officers that would do what I wish I could have done when I first got started. And then you just acclimate, you get used to it. And then, for me, I see officers and they're pretty I'm happy if they get an email address and they think to ask if they have a social media.
right,
You
right,
get an
yeah,
officer that asks those two questions. Listen up, folks. If you're thinking about being a cop, if you can get a victim, a suspect, a witness, social media account, and you can tell the officer on the scene, you have just made that detective's day. So if you're an officer trying to get better, you do those two things and an email address. Like you're the top cop in my opinion. So
No, it's
simple.
it's so good, and
Yeah.
I know, like, the vast majority of drug deals that we do now are all over social media, Facebook Messenger,
Yes.
Snapchat, like, all that. That's just the world they live in. So, like, you getting that information is huge.
Okay. Let's flip the script. I think we've got a good background. We've been going at it an hour. I want people to understand the world of narcotics. I want to get into the Narcotics Investigation Association, but I want to get into one. Let's get this out of the way because we're at the hour mark, and this would be a good clip to have. What is your biggest, best bust?
Ooh, man. Um, I I had a really unique one, and I wouldn't say it would be the biggest, but it's probably the one that I'm most proud of, because I actually was able to work it, even though I was the supervisor for the unit. But um, so a little bit of context: I've been on our SWAT team now. We have a regional team, part-time team, but I've been on that team for 18 years. And the reason why I'm sharing that is it goes into how I knew a crook that ended up being in our jail from a SWAT call out that we had served on his house. That was a task force related case when I was on patrol, and it was a pretty memorable one because we were doing a flashbang on a essentially on a bang pole. So for those of you guys that don't understand that, it's basically a flashbang that's at the end of a pole, and the pin that you pull is integrated into it. So we had we had intel that this guy was armed. He had guns in his room, and we wanted to get into that room and get control of him before he had access to his guns. So one of the tactics that we used was his room was right next to the front door, and we integrated the bang pole through the window. And basically, as that went off, we made our entry into the front door and was able to get into the room and get him in custody. And the reason why this one was memorable was we debriefed him afterwards, and he heard the knock and announce. He said he woke up and he looked, and he said he thought while he was coming out of his stupor that it was a microphone that was coming in on like a boom
Like a
mic
boom
that
mic.
was coming in through the window. And so he was staring right at it when the flash went off. And when I was one of the first couple guys into the room, and he was totally dazed, like you couldn't have worked any better. And we were able to get him into custody. And then he had a couple firearms in his closet that were there. So the intel was right. And at that time, he was a pretty big drug dealer, and he went to prison. Well, fast forward, now I'm the unit supervisor in our drug task force, and see that this guy he gets picked up in our local casino, and he's arrested on I think like a probation violation warrant for DOC. But when they arrest him, he's got meth on him. So no one else in our drug task force had heard of this guy or was familiar with him. But I've, as most drug dealers do, they don't quit after getting popped. They continue to go back to what they know how to do, and that's dealing dope. So I start listening to his jail phone calls, and I start
Nice.
recognizing, I start identifying people that he's talking to. And he's basically talking to two main people: his girlfriend and a guy that's dealing dope for him while he is while he's in jail, running out his DOC time for his probation violation. So they are talking in code about where the dope's stored, how much they have, who the players are that this guy's dealing to. Well, through good. Uh,
Is that what we're talking about? The bang pole?
yep, that's a bang pole right there.
All
Yep,
right. So for
yep,
those listening, I just popped the picture up. I looked it up real quick, but
yep.
just wanted to kind of give you a visual of what he was
Yeah,
referring
kind
to.
of looks like a boom mic, but yeah, it's got
Yeah,
like where the mic would be the flashbang tied onto the end there.
that's awesome.
So, um, so I start basically identifying this guy's whole network of who he's supplying to, the guy that's dealing drugs for him, and identify his girlfriend. And then we start setting up surveillance on this guy and the guy's girlfriend, identify them, start seeing them do hand to hands, and eventually get enough to do a search warrant on his main courier that's doing all his work for him while he's in jail. Roll that guy, and then end up getting his girlfriend with a bunch of dope. And while all this is going on, they're continuing to talk in code, but I've already figured out kind of what they're referring to and what and essentially I'm able to write numerous search warrants, and able to seize all this guy's cash because he starts
Ooh.
talking about where his cash is and wanting it moved around and taking it to his cousin's house. And so I'm supposed to identify him. But the reason I thought it was pretty unique case and pretty cool that I'm proud of is this guy sunk his own ship. It was all his own mouth that he couldn't keep shut over recorded jail phone lines
Which they
that
know it's recorded.
Right, it tells you, like, this is being audio and video record or, what because now
Yeah.
we have video calls too, but audio recorded at the time, and, so I was essentially able to seize, it was, like, over $20,000, pounds of meth, pounds of heroin,
Okay,
all
that's what
f
I was gonna ask. What type of
yeah,
dope was it? Okay.
yeah, so this guy was a meth and heroin dealer, and this guy was unique in that he was 100% in it for the profit. He did not use
Didn't
dope.
use. Okay.
Nope. His girlfriend used, but he did not use dope. And he had a bunch of assets that we were able to get to and that, tie him all up. And then I took his case and presented it to our AUSA, which for those of you guys that don't know, that's our federal prosecutor. So they took the case federal, which the good thing about federal time is you don't get good time. And so if you're sentenced to 5 years, you're getting 5 years versus a stateside, you get 5 years and you might serve half of it. So I was able to present this case all on these jail phone calls and then showing, hey, I not only have him talking about it, but I wrote search warrants based on these conversations, and I found this dope and this cash and these locations based on what he said. Everything corroborated, and sent that guy to prison for I think it was like 8 to 10 years. I know I think he's still in right now. But anyway, it was unique, for a few different reasons, but it was basically just again taking the time to one listen to calls and then figure out the code these guys were talking in and then start taking that information and start digging through those different things that we already talked about like Wizen and those different networking and systems to identify folks and then to actually go put surveillance up on them and then confirm everything that you think is happening and verifying that it is and then getting paper and getting search warrants and then all three of them ended up going to jail, two on the state or two federally, and then the girlfriend went on the state side. But that one was probably one of my favorite cases because that guy was super cocky, and I went in and read a Miranda, and he was didn't want to talk, and he just thought that he was above all this. And then I mentioned, well, this case is going federal, and then you could kind of see the pucker factor, but he didn't believe me.
Yeah.
And then we ended up doing a free talk at the very end. And for those of you that don't know, a free talk, that's like where the defendant sits down with his attorney and um, and he agrees to basically answer any and all questions that you have in exchange for getting a reduced sentence or that kind of thing. And so it was one of those gratifying moments of one getting that guy out of our community and then two working a case that he had no other choice that he wanted to schedule a free talk because he knew he was screwed.
Yeah.
So,
For my internet law experts out there, um, I get this question quite a bit. Like, oh, I know you guys you can plea things out. You can give me deals. You can do this. You can do that. It's important to know, and I'm going to use Chris because he's a 20-year plus expert, especially in the area of narcotics, that if you get a state charge, yes, deals can be made. But if you have a true victim, like if you steal some shit from somebody's house, you assault somebody, whatever it is, if you have an actual victim and the state's not the victim, you're not getting a deal. There's nothing the officer can do for you. So get that out of your head. And then for my people that listen, they just like to hear, cool, did you knows? That's one of the things. Did you know that, yes, officers, when they make deals and stuff, it is on a state charge versus when there's a real victim. If there's a real victim, there's not a deal to be made unless somehow the person that is the victim chooses not to press charges. I guess that would be the only chance you really have. So, but yeah, that's the meat and potatoes when it comes to making deals, guys. If it's a state charge, you have a chance. Doesn't mean you're gonna get it, but you got a chance. No, that's a cool ass story, man. I love the fact that especially I tell people all the time, like if we were in the business of going against Einstein's, cops would strike out a lot, but most of these guys post their shit on social media, all the crimes they commit now. So it's the business is good because most people are dumb that are committing crimes. So all right, that's cool. I like putting little clips out there of my guests, and that when it has to deal with narcotics, I always ask like, "What was your biggest bust?" You know, I had a guy that was ATF, no, not ATF, DEA, DEA. He was DEA, and so I was like, what's your best one?" And he was scrambling. He wasn't ready for it, but eventually we got to it where it's basically like a whole semi truck full of dope, and I'm like, God damn, like that's a shitload of dope. My best, I know you're really curious about my best, um, wasn't a bust that I actually made, but the information I gave led to the bust. So I'm going to take credit for it. I pull over a vehicle that doesn't belong in the neighborhood. My it's a minority group area, and I got two white boys with lightning bolt tattoos on their necks and shit
Mm.
driving out of there, and I'm like, that doesn't fit. Why are they over here? Initially, my first thought was they were over there to do a hit or something. So like I'm trying to stalk them the best I can in a patrol vehicle. You know, lights out, trying not to rev my engine or anything because Crown Vics stick out like a sore thumb. At least at the time, everybody knew the sound of a Crown Vic.
Oh yeah.
And follow him. Got enough for a traffic stop. Make a traffic stop. Passenger pukes.
Mm.
You know, yeah. He throws up. He is so nervous he pukes. It wasn't because he was drunk or anything like that. Do my sweet talking, search the vehicle. I find a little bit of marijuana, nothing big. Get in the back of the truck, and there's 2 5-gallon buckets filled with motor oil. And I'm like, oh shit, there's something in there. That's where
Oh
it's at.
yeah.
Let me use the dipstick. So I use the dipstick that I see back there, and nothing's inside of it. When I pull it was like a wood stir, like for paint. It was like a paint stir, and when I pulled it out, it was like a darkish red liquid. I'm like, that ain't motor oil. That's weird. What is this stuff? And I ask them, and they're like, oh, it's just I can't remember what this is. Some sort of motor fluid. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know vehicles that well, so I was like, fuck, I didn't get anything. But I wrote it all up, and I tagged our narc team and our gang team. I'm like, something's fucked up with this. I don't know what the deal is, but yeah. Well, come to find out, long story short, it was meth oil. Never heard of meth oil. And it was 2
Okay.
5-gallon buckets full. And for those that don't know, drug is measured by weight, and liquid weighs a fuck ton. So it was a big bust in the eyes of anybody for dope. The narcotics team saw my write up and sent me an email like, hey, you need to know you did a good job. And I'm not bragging about myself. What I'm bragging about is I took the time to make an info report. It wasn't a report that goes to anybody other than the people I tag, and I didn't even make an arrest. You know, like I said, they had like a joint, something like that. I made them stomp that out. They didn't have any warrants, so I let them go. But I got all their information. I verified who they were. That's the important part. Verify who people are, and then I made a detailed report of the stuff I found in that bucket because I was like, it just stood out. It was weird. Why would this guy throw up? You know, they're in a neighborhood they didn't belong. Well, the NARC team within 24 hours saw that report, went out, got it. They knew exactly what I was talking about, apparently, when I described it, and said, yep, thanks to you, we got 2 5-gallon buckets full of meth oil. So I was like, holy shit. So that's the biggest bust that I would have ever had had I been a narc guy. So
Well, and I can save this story for a little bit later, but when I was our commander of our task force in 21 and 22, and our biggest bust for amount of like asset seized as far as value was actually a construction theft ring
oh
that was
yeah.
in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it was literally like the guy had enough stuff to build like 2 full houses that
Yeah.
he had stolen off construction sites, and it wasn't even a drug bust, but like I'll tell you what, the ripple effect through the community though, it was like
Yeah.
people were
Yep.
so happy. We had so many builders that were, especially with COVID and everything, that were out of. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it was costing them thousands of dollars
Yeah.
in delayment, and being able to finish their projects because of this ring of guys that were stealing stuff at night. And so yeah, it was started out with patrol, and then we got handed off to our task force because our detectives were busy. So anyway, it's just Yeah,
Yeah.
you never know what's gonna happen.
Yeah. You're in my realm now, the property crime
Yep,
stuff.
yep.
So, we just had, because our construction guys, they were building a whole new, housing community. They're building a new suburb, and, they were getting hit every 3 nights, like clockwork, to the point where they put the cameras up. They called us and said, "These guys will be here tonight."
Yeah,
And I don't know if you guys can get here. And I was like, property crimes team. I was like, we need to get there. So I tell my guys, hey, we got to work a late one. And they were game. Everybody was game. We show up. It was, I mean, you couldn't have picked a better op to have, because we Google mapped it. We saw there was only 1 point in, 1 point out. We set up. We had guys hide in the adjacent house that was vacant because it was a new build, and wait. And sure as shit, homeboy shows up a half hour after we set up, because our construction guys knew the time, knew when and that was over $500,000 worth of shit this guy has stolen. So after we get him, we go to his house, we do a warrant on his house, and there is not all the stuff. He'd been fencing it, selling it, but we got a large majority of construction equipment crap back for them, windows and doors and all that stuff. That stuff adds up quick, and the price of lumber today is more than the cost of dope. I tell you that.
yeah. No, we the case that I was talking about, and like full like all I did was take one tip where a neighbor had called in that this guy had got his truck stuck on a construction site, and he had written the license plate down.
Nice.
And I handed it off to my task force guys. I was like, "Hey, I think this is our guy." They set up surveillance on him, and like, I mean, they literally had it solved within 48 hours.
Oh, that's the
But
best.
it had been months, and like, I mean, contractors were really like they were wanting to hire our guys off duty to protect their job
Yeah.
sites, and I mean, and they were literally calling our sheriff like nonstop, and that's the thing. Like our community is made up of our immediate communities essentially made up of two different counties and two different cities, and they were affecting all of these different areas, and so when they got the guy, he had like four stolen trailers, like dump trailers. He had pallets of appliances. I mean, he had
Yeah.
like eight refrigerators in his house. He was literally going to these new construction homes and gutting all the appliances. One of the assistant chief's house had been hit, and we were able to recover some of his appliances that were there at the house. And
That's awesome.
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I mean, but it was one of those that was so overwhelming. Like they got the search warrant, we hit the place, and then we discovered how much stuff was there, and it took over 2 days to process everything with our evidence team, and we had to bring in movers and then had to scramble and find storage units that we could utilize as temporary evidence holding
Evidence
because
lockers. Yeah.
we didn't have an evidence bay big enough for all the stuff that we were seizing. And I mean, it was kind of a big pain in the ass, but I mean, obviously it was worth it, and the
Yeah.
community was super happy, and we had builders showing up, and we basically had like open house where it was like, hey, if you can point out this is stuff and show them the police report that you had reported this stolen, and they were able to take it right off site and get it back to their job sites. But like literally had gone into like a subdivision of new homes and cut through like 12 HVAC heat pumps and loaded them all up, and I mean, it was nuts the amount of stuff this guy had taken. And so it was uh that was one of those that you like, it made you really appreciate your job and the difference you can make in your community,
Yeah. When
when
you
you get a
know,
case like that, because nobody likes a thief. Everybody hates a thief
yeah.
because everyone's had that happen to them, and it's like,
And when you're
when you're
helping
able
a
to catch
small
that guy.
business owner who
Oh
can't
yeah,
recoup that cost
exactly.
and that stuff, that's a hard thing for people to fathom. Like, one of my favorite things to do is bust people stealing lawn equipment from these lawn companies. It seems like a mundane thing and not that big a deal, but you get this guy his 4 weed eaters and his 2 lawnmowers
It's
back, and
his livelihood.
you just saved his business.
Yeah,
And
100%.
because where I'm at here in Texas, you got a bunch of people that have migrated over from Mexico, and they have thrived off of that business in itself,
Yep.
and they've created a small LLC, and I mean they're living the American dream, and I fucking love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love seeing it, and I love seeing them. But there's nothing more satisfying than getting them their stuff back. When you get them, I mean, other than catching pedophiles and homicide suspects, like those are cool things to do. I mentally can't handle the crimes against children stuff. That's why I don't do that job.
I'm
But
with you, man. I'm with you.
but when it comes to property crimes, I know it seems like not such a big deal, but when you see the faces and the appreciation of the people that do have those small businesses and stuff like that, I just give a small example here in Texas and that the lawn stuff because that's honestly that is our bread and butter. They wait, and this is the fucked up thing. They wait for these people to start doing a job. They'll be working on a lawn and they go out to go switch out a piece of equipment and their equipment's gone out of their trailer or their whole trailer's gone.
Jeez.
And I'm just like, motherfucker, like that.
Yeah.
I get so enraged for them. And
Mhm.
I know the chances are small, but they're getting better. Now that
Yeah.
LPRs are out there, guys, I'm telling you, LPRs are a big thing. Definitely, if your communities don't have them, you as a sheriff, like they're huge, man. They're absolutely huge. They are worth their weight in gold, and they're a force multiplier, people. Like for his department, when we're talking 9, 12 deputies, whatever it is, every time you put a camera up, you just put another 24-hour person out there to help somewhat. It's not going to
Yeah.
be not going to save everything, but it's another set of eyes.
No, I've got so my brother's a cop in California. They have them in their area, and so I've heard countless stories. But we just had two of our recovered stolens located. Both of them were occupied down in about I don't know, it's about 2 hours from us in Yakima. But they just got I think they're on the flock system,
Okay.
and I just went to my administration and was like, hey. I think we need to look into getting these for our area, and was sharing with one of my administrators the two success stories of two of our stolens that got popped down there with the readers, and how they actually not only got the cars back, but they got suspects inside them and were able to prosecute those cases. And
Yeah.
so that's something I'm really pushing for our area because yeah, it's a game changer.
Yeah. If you ever need help with that, I don't know if you know this. I'm a part of the
Yes.
National Real Time Crime Center Association. So that stuff is huge. And I think as much as it benefits large departments, I think it benefits small departments even more
Yeah, and
because,
we have two major highways. One of them which basically goes through two of our cities. So we get a lot of traffic coming through, going eastbound towards Idaho,
yeah.
Montana, Minnesota,
Yep.
and we have some major drug trafficking routes
Yeah,
that
take
go
advantage of
through.
your choke
Yeah,
points. If you know
yeah,
it's a main thoroughfare, man, that it's worth its weight in gold. You got one coming in, one coming out. Boom, just get both ways,
oh
and you
yeah.
do that on the both sides of town. It's beautiful.
Hmm.
And like I said, it pays for itself. I promise. Your citizens will, your county, if you're a sheriff, will love you
Oh yeah.
because it will pay for itself very quickly. But yeah. So all right, sir. Good big bust. I like that. I like the I especially love people telling on themselves. Um, but let's get into okay. So you're a narc connoisseur. You've moved up the ranks, and you start talking about the. I'm going to pop this up on the screen. So if you're listening, I'm going to show the Washington State Narcotics Investigation Association. It is a mouthful. And that's saying something considering I'm on part of the National Real Time Crime Center Association. But kind of explain since you are the presidente of this association, sir.
Yeah, so our association's basically made up of about 500 members, narcotics, mainly narcotics detectives, but we also represent like PROAC units, street crime units, those types of things that might dabble in, crimes from prostitution rings to drugs to, you know, theft rings, like stuff we've been talking about. And our association is basically to provide the best training that we can for narcotics units. And so we run a conference every year in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and we bring in speakers from all over. We've had Tim Kennedy as one of our keynote speakers.
Nice.
Matt Thomas, who you've had on your show, is one of
Yep.
our keynote speakers. We just had, oh gosh, we had two Lamb that came in and did a talk. Had the DEA agent that took down El Chapo the first go around.
Oh, that would be a good
So
one.
some great case debriefs. Kind of what you're scrolling through right now is we have an officer down memorial, where we do a raffle and a fundraiser every year. Sergeant Jeremy Brown, who's on the screen right now, is actually one of our members that was shot and killed while on surveillance 2 years ago. And we have named our we do a memorial cornhole tournament in his honor every year at our conference. But he was
Okay.
one of our members. But anyway, one of the things our association does is any law enforcement officer killed in the state of Washington, we write a check to their family, regardless if they're a member or not. But just being that they're a brother or sister in law enforcement in the state of Washington, we honor them and write their family a check. So we do a fundraiser through raffle drawings and our vendors donations every year for that, and then we put on a building entry class for new narcotics detectives once a year, and that's kind of how I initially got involved, was kind of wearing that dual hat of being a narc supervisor, but also my time on the SWAT team, teaching tactics for narcotics detectives, and basically getting away from the old, dynamic hits, but trying to take guys away from their stronghold, doing creative things like vehicle stops, or getting them out of their cars, going into a store, taking them down open air, and just different things like that. So we, our association, not every state has an association, but I know Texas has an association. And how this works on a national level is our association sends our at least two of our board members back to Washington D.C. every year in February, and we have a national narcotics officers coalition, and we go up on Capitol Hill and we talk with our congressional legislators about what is happening on a national basis with drugs and what's happening at a state level with drugs in our communities, and look for help with getting federal assistance for, like, we have drug task forces that are funded in Washington state through the federal system. Most people don't know this, but not a state dollar of Washington tax money goes into narcotics law enforcement. So it's up to
Really?
each individual, yep, sheriff or chief, to say, hey, we want to spend the overtime, put a body into a task force, send them to training, outfit them with a UC car, all of that stuff. And the only federal funding we get is, or only funding we get from working through um, narcotics law enforcement is through the feds, and we have it's called the Burn Jag Grant, which funds 18 of our drug task forces in the state of Washington. And then we have HIDA counties, which is high intensity drug trafficking areas. And if you're a HIDA county, then you get funding through that federal program. So what we really try to do, because we're not state funded, is one, educate our state legislators. So we have a legislative rep that goes to our Washington state legislature, and works with a lobbyist to try to get funding for that at the state side. And we're working on that right now. The biggest thing that just happened, and most people have heard of this, but in case you guys haven't, is we have we had a ruling that I would say is a piss poor ruling that happened with our state Supreme Court, which ruled that our drug law for simple possession was unconstitutional because it didn't have the word knowingly in it. And so what happened roughly 2.5 years ago was this ruling came out, and the case that was the caveat to this was the defense that a gal was arrested with meth in her jeans, and her defense was, these aren't my jeans, these are my friend's jeans.
That's been used
Literally, not
so
these are my
many
pants,
times.
was
These aren't my pants.
literally the argument. These aren't my
Hold on.
pants.
For
Yeah.
those listening, this is a training scenario um, quote that is used throughout the nation by police agencies everywhere. When an officer is doing a scenario based training for recruits, will say, "Oh, these aren't my pants," because it's used so much in the streets.
Yep.
Sorry.
So this gal took it to the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court ruled that the word knowingly was not in the definition for simple possession. And so they threw it out and said it was unconstitutional. So what that meant was anyone that had been convicted for simple possession, UPOX, unlawful possession of a controlled substance, that felony was thrown out off their record. Everyone that was in prison or jail for those charges was immediately released. And for 2.5 years, drugs were essentially legalized in the state of Washington.
Holy shit.
So yeah, it was a shit show, and it's been fixed somewhat. It's still not where we want it, but this is the type of thing why I'm sharing it with what our association does to try to get this back to where drugs are illegal
Okay.
again. So
So hold on. Before you
yeah,
keep going, there's been the argument, and I'm going to leave my own opinion out of this, but there's always been the argument. Like, if these things were just legalized, we wouldn't have near the amount of crime that we have, right? Because that's one of the things that the black market, all of this stuff, the need and the drive for the drugs and like all of this, all of our problems would go away if this stuff was legalized. So you being the foremost I mean, you are the president of the Washington State Narcotics Investigations Association. If you are not a subject matter expert, I don't know who is. With your opinion, based on your training and experience, what is your thought in the 2 years of drugs basically being legalized?
yeah, absolute fallacy. The first thing that I would tell people is go look up what Seattle currently looks like, and look
What
at
about
how
Chaz?
bad,
Is
yeah,
Chaz out there? Yeah.
Chad, whatever, the crime rate in Seattle, um, and so when people are like, oh yeah, just let people do drugs, it won't affect anything. Businesses are literally shutting down because theft, all the things that again associated with that nexus of being addicted to something and doing anything in your power to get that next hit, especially when it comes to opiates and now fentanyl,
Yeah.
is resulting in crime like we've never seen before in the state of Washington. So,
And deaths. I imagine deaths have
oh
gone
yeah,
through the roof.
overdoses, and that's the thing that people are like, oh, it's a victimless crime. It's not a victimless crime because I've had countless parents call me and all they want is me to go arrest their son or daughter because at least they know they're someplace safe where they getting a meal and they have a bed because they can't sleep at night because they're waiting for that knock on their door from a law enforcement officer to tell them that their son or daughter has overdosed and died.
Be-
And so
well, one of the things people don't realize that's happening is, yes, fentanyl is in narcotics, that the standardized narcotics that you're thinking of, ecstasy, all these different like drugs that people shouldn't be doing,
mhm,
but they're also hiding them in pills and stuff that people can do that are pharmaceutical. So that is where the real problems start to come in. So you're wondering how your son or daughter are going to get affected by this. They may not be heroin addicts. They may not be people doing ecstasy or some of these other type. Maybe they're just doing regular old antidepressant pills, and to save a little bit of money, they're buying them on the streets, and that has fentanyl in it. And if they are not used to any type of fentanyl, that will kill them. I had Derek Maltz from former DEA, I think it was. He has got a big campaign right now, basically because of parents and their kids overdosing on normal pharmaceuticals that they thought would be safe, and they're being killed by fentanyl. And you know, this is where the callousness in people that aren't in this, they don't see the faces of people. They don't see the faces of these parents, and they don't see the faces of these addicts, and they don't see this stuff, and they're very dehumanized in this, and they're like, well, they shouldn't have been doing drugs illegally anyway. Like, you tell that to these people's parents. You tell that to this kid that got lucky and lived, and he wasn't trying to do fentanyl. He wasn't trying to do any of this shit. Like, I get it. It's against the law, but at the same time, we gotta keep some sort of humanity behind the fact that, just like you said earlier, We all make mistakes. It's just another chapter of your story. I just don't want it to be the final. No matter who it is, no matter what's going on, I don't want it to be your final chapter. If you can recover from it, that's why I got into this game of being a police officer. Like I want to help people at the end of the day. Um, and what you're talking about with fentanyl is just huge. And Derek Maltz, that's another good guy. Like if you ever need a guest speaker, I can get you connected with him. He's huge. He's been on Fox News several times. All this stuff. He's a good dude and really
So
knows that shit. So
so he was at our conference last year.
oh,
He was our opener.
beautiful.
Yeah, yep. So I've
Yes,
met Derek. He's awesome. He, like you said, he does a great
he's
job
so passionate.
representing parents who have lost their loved one. And I actually play one of the videos that he played at our conference is a documentary called Dead on Arrival, and
Yeah.
it's a guy out of LA that started doing collaboration with parents. One of them's a narcotics detective who lost his daughter, who thought she was getting cocaine and had it laced with fentanyl and overdosed and died. But I,
Damn.
one of the things I do is I go around to our local schools and I do some education on the dangers of drugs and fentanyl, and I play that documentary to freshmen in high school and sometimes eighth grade too, depending on which school is having me in there. But yeah, Derek is a voice for for thousands and thousands of parents out there who've lost a loved one, and that's the thing. Like on an anecdotal level, like our jail right now, um, they piss test everybody that comes into the jail, and 60% of the folks coming into our jails have fentanyl in their system, and a lot of them, they're like, no, I don't use fentanyl, I'm a meth user. But again, pretty much the cartels are lacing everything with fentanyl, and so people like you said, they don't realize what they're taking and that it has fentanyl in it, unless it's coming from that pharmacy. Anything you get on the street out there, even if they say, oh, this is an Adderall pill or this is a Xanax or whatever else, you can't trust them because you don't know. And if it's getting pressed in a pill mill, chances are it's got fentanyl in it. So it is extremely dangerous. Again, it's something that I'm very passionate about. And that's what I recognize as like, yes, enforcement is needed, but so is prevention and so is education, and we've got to get the word out to our youth, and that's where I'm on a task force right now with my congressional representative, who's named Dan Newhouse, and he's put together a fentanyl task force. And one of the things that I'm really pushing for is, we need a program like DARE, but we need something nationally pushed out to our youth about the dangers of fentanyl, and it needs to go to every school and every child because we're continuing to lose young people who just don't know any better, and it's inexcusable. So anyway, I know we kind of got turned off on that, but
No, you're good,
there's
man.
more.
That's why I
There's
told you we're gonna go down rabbit holes.
Oh yeah, and going back to the Seattle thing, there's two great documentaries out there. One is called Seattle is Dying, and I think the other one is Seattle's Lost Its Soul. But there's a reporter named Eric Johnson, who's been a reporter in Seattle like since I was in college. And just to give a little bit perspective, is I went to a small Christian college, Seattle Pacific University in Queen Anne Hill, from 1996 to 2000. And I went downtown Seattle, you know, um, all through my college days. And Seattle was clean. It was a beautiful city. I never once felt like it was dangerous. I was going to be aggressively panhandled. I had to worry about my car getting broken into, crime, all of that. And you fast forward to today, and it's like you, there is nothing that I would there's nothing that I would want to take my family to in Seattle to have to go through and see what is currently down there right now with, drugs being openly used on the streets, human feces all over the sidewalk, and people, you know, think the loving thing to do is just to let people abuse their bodies and do whatever they want. Well, there's a thing called tough love too, and sometimes you have to draw a line in the sand and say, "Hey, I love someone so much, I'm gonna put some safeguards in place and prevent them from being able to do this to themselves, because if they continue to do that, they're gonna die, uh, and they're never going to be a productive member of society. They're going to be a drain on society. And that's what, when I talk to people about drug legalization and, like, is it working, or, is it a victimless crime and we should just, have places. I mean, these folks have taken over all the parks in Seattle. There's nowhere for people to take their kids to go play soccer or baseball or basketball because they've all been overrun with drug addicts. And that's the thing in that documentary, uh, that people got upset about was, the reporters interviewing somebody, and they're like, what percentage of people down here do you think are addicted to drugs? And she's like, all of us are. I mean, she's basically just saying every single person down here has a drug habit. And the other thing that I think is really important that I try to educate people on is one of our keynote speakers that we had 2 years ago is a guy named Sam Quiones, and he wrote a book called The Least of Us, and it tracks basically the drug cartels and the ingredients that they're using in producing methamphetamine. And that what his synopsis through the book in the conclusion comes to is that long-term meth use with these chemicals is leading has led to the mental illness that we are seeing throughout our country today, because those drugs are literally frying people's brains, and they're walking zombies. And so what, he goes through all the research and everything, but just is like, this mental health crisis that we're having and we're trying to solve, and we have behavioral health units and we're trying to do all these things to get people help, but this drug use is really what is causing it. So again, to go back to the argument that, it's a victimless crime and there's no harm, it's like, you know I couldn't be more disagreeable to that conclusion.
Yeah, and you'll so another argument you'll typically get is, well, you guys are fighting such an uphill battle. You're cutting one head off the snake, another one's just going to pop up. All you guys are trying to do is create revenue for the state or for your unit or whatever it is. That's a typical argument. Um, so what do you say to that?
Well, I mean, especially for Washington State, I would say it's a losing battle because we have basically both our legs cut off and one of our arms tied behind our back, and we're fighting the battle with one good arm. If you funded task forces at the state side, at the state level, and you gave us the technology that we need and the resources we need and the amount of manpower, overtime, like, there would be a significant difference in the amount of production and reduction in crime that would occur. But I mean, we're operating on life support, and it's not, and that's just the reality. It's not to say, hey, we should give up, but by any means. I mean, I think about it for my own children. I have two children. One's 15, one's 11, and I want the community that I work and live in to be a safe place for them and not be a Seattle. And that's what's crazy right now is we're getting an influx of people that are moving over here from the west side because it's gotten so bad over there. And it's just the same thing you're seeing with Californians fleeing to Texas and Idaho and all the other places because they're sick of it. And it's been so bad. They're like, that line in the sand's been drawn, and they're like, we're not going to raise our family around that anymore. And that's what, I try to tell people is like, you know, we don't want what's happening over there over here, and we're gonna make a difference in what we're doing. And one of the other things that I think is important to at least bring up is the prosecutors, and that is a factor because in King County, for example, Seattle area, they're under this BS no bail thing because it's racist to put bail on people, and these people are just getting booked and right out the next day, and there's no consequence, and they're continuing to just commit crimes because they're just like, yeah, it doesn't matter, I'm going to be out the next day. Well, you come over here to our county, and I've listened to the jail phone calls, and they do have bail, and a lot of times the bail will be set high if they're pending cases in other counties because we'll do our research and figure out, oh yeah, they're out on, 5 pending felonies over on the west side, and we let our prosecutors know that, and our judges set a high bail. And then I listen to the jail phone calls where they're like, "Hey, I'm not getting out, and we're never coming back over here when I do get out because it's not like Seattle." So, I'm just sharing a small anecdotal story of compare and contrast of like, if you have prosecutors and a judicial system where they hold people accountable, you're not having the same problems. But again, you know, it's we've gone woke over on the west side, and everything's racist, and especially if you're a white person, you can't say anything because you're racist, and it's just absolutely mind blowing how far it's gone. But you know, I mentioned earlier, like testing with all those agencies over there, and I'm like, I thank the Lord every day that I didn't get hired over there, because I'm like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't be over there, and that's why we're getting so many laterals that are coming over to Eastern Washington, because it's just it's hopeless over there.
Yeah. So I've interviewed Mark Lamb. I've talked to Matt Thomas.
Yep.
I've had Banning Sweatland, another big name. He's a big name here in Texas anyway. He's pretty big on LinkedIn. All these sheriff's departments and stuff like that. And man, I find that my law enforcement mind leans towards the way that sheriff's departments tend to operate, more so than city PDs and stuff like that. Now, fortunately, where I am at, um, it's pretty similar alliance as far as the mindset on enforcing the law and having prosecutors, prosecute and stuff like that. It's not at the level I want it to be, but it is definitely, compared to the status quo for the nation, we're very much doing a good job over here. So I like where it's at. And I love the fact that we do have some cities, and no offense to Seattle, I love that we have some cities out there like that, so we can show, hey, look, we tried your way,
Yep.
whether it was intentional or unintentional. With the Supreme Court case hearing where drugs basically were legalized for 2 years, and it showed, like, not only did it not work, it made it worse. Like, so that theory goes right out the window. And guys like you who have 20 plus years in this, in law enforcement and with narcotics specifically, so we can, it goes to show, like, okay, you can make any argument you want in theory, but you don't do this job. You don't understand how the effects of these narcotics are on the community, because you're not there to see it. All you see is either somebody in the hospital or somebody getting arrested. You don't see the in between. Guys like you, that get to see the in between. Guys like Derek Maltz. You guys, you just have this crazy type of experience that it's hard to get out there. And I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing. Like, this is gonna be a good episode. I'm very interested in this episode, so that's what makes me think it's gonna be a good episode. I love hearing this stuff and getting that different type of perspective. But you've talked about where things are screwed up, um, and you've talked about ways that it's continued to, like, perpetuate the issue. If I were to make you king for the day, make you president, whatever it is, what is your line of fixes to start helping get narcotics under control and helping communities everywhere?
Well, I think at the national perspective, and I've heard some other, big names. Dan Crenshaw's a big proponent of this, but
The pirate
is
seal.
yeah, yeah, that's right. Is labeling cartels a terrorist network, and being able to do military uh, intervention, and using drone strikes, taking out their processing, their where they're making meth, where they're making fentanyl, and then targeting them, and if we can't capture them, they're getting taken out. And I know that sounds harsh, but, like, I mean, the perspective to me, if you look at it broadly and you said, hey, we have one country, and this other country's killed 60 to 80,000 of them, and what I'm talking about is fentanyl overdoses, and all of those drugs are coming from that country, and
Mexico.
we're just going to continue, yeah, continue to do nothing. Um, like, that's insanity to me. And so, like, and I general Joe public out there probably thinks that that's an extreme thing to do, but it's like, hey, if you look at the cartel culture and how they deal with their rivals, the only thing that works is violence. And sometimes violence is the answer. People don't want to hear that, but sometimes violence is the answer. And
Our nation is based on that.
yeah, and it's spilling over already on the
Sorry.
borders. Cartels are battling in the streets. There's been victims that are innocents that are getting caught up into that, or catch a stray bullet, and innocents are being killed. But that I think is the biggest thing, is military intervention, and naming these cartels terrorist cells, and then I think securing the border, finishing the wall, making it more difficult. Now there's always been
Oh, you
ingenuity.
Trumper.
I know, right? Crazy. But I've flown it. I've seen the gaps, and I've seen how easy it is to get across. And it's like, hey, we're financing border security in Ukraine. Why can't we do it in the United States of
Yeah.
America?
Guys
Again,
like
it's
Matt
it's
Thomas.
racist.
Matt
Yeah,
Thomas wrote that book and he came on and talked exactly about the problems they're facing in Arizona.
yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
like, that is insane. Like
Yeah,
I
I
never
I
would have thought.
flew in Pinal County's helicopter with my sheriff, and got the tour with Sheriff Lamb and Matt, and saw it firsthand and saw a day in the life. And I mean, we captured 17 folks coming across the border that day, and I mean that was just in like 3 hours of flight time. Like it's crazy. And so I think nationally those are two of the big things, and then I think getting the proper funding for state and locals to have the resources and the technology that we need to make these cases. Because again, I said, like, our in Washington State, our only funding that we have for these task forces is federal. And it's up to each head of their police agency or sheriff to say, hey, we're going to put time, resources, and investment into those positions to put a body in a task force. And that comes out of their own budget. None of that's being supplemented. So if we could truly fund task forces and fund those positions, and have, you know, money and overtime for fentanyl based investigations, and then setting, especially with fentanyl, like the the if they made the federal requirements where, hey, like, the crack epidemic, where, hey, you're getting 5 years automatic if you have over 100 pills or whatever it is, and they actually follow through with that. I mean, we know we're going to have to build more prisons, but at the same time, there's going to be more of a consequence for guys being willing to deal this poison out there, because that's what it is. It's poison. 6 and 10 pills right now, the DEA says is an overdose amount, and the cartels, they don't care. They don't give two shits about someone overdosing or not. They're just pumping it out there because they're just trying to get people addicted. Because once they have them, they know statistically they're never going back
Yeah.
until they die. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I like that plan. I'm not against that. I don't see any holes in that logic, based on my experience. So, um, all right.
but I will touch on the prevention piece, because there is a thing for that, and I have had informants that I have walked down that road of getting help, and unfortunately, very few have been able to stay clean. But there are success stories out there. But like, I know right now that one of the difficulties for our community is actually getting someone a bed to get into rehab, and so the reality is, they hit rock bottom. They say, "Hey, I want to go," and then it's like, all right, check back in 60 days. Well, what's going to happen in 60 days? They're going to continue to use, and chances are they're never going to come back. So we have to have a system in place where if someone wants to go, we can immediately get them the help that they need and get them out of that situation. Because my experience has been, you if they stay in the area and they're around the same amount of friends, and especially if they go to court appointed rehab, all that is a networking for other drug addicts to get together and figure out more drug dealers they can get drugs from. They have to be totally removed away from the area, and essentially start over with new friends that aren't going to drag them back down into that lifestyle. And it's not easy. It's complicated, and I get that. But there is a way that we can set that up, if we had the funding and, essentially the locations to send those people. But right now, um, we have a behavioral health unit that's integrated into our sheriff's office, And those folks come out on calls with us, and then they're the ones that I'm, basically, if someone needs help or needs resources, I send them their way. And then that's their frustration, is like, hey, I have somebody that wants help, I got nowhere to send them, there's no beds available. So that needs to be fixed as well.
Yeah, it's the follow through. That's a big one. Just like you said, the biggest problem with these guys when they get out is they get put right back where they came from.
Yep.
Of course, they're going to fall into the same circles. That's all they have.
Yep.
Um, if we're going to invest money into something that is more for the long term, I think that's a big one. Is it sounds counterintuitive, not even counterintuitive. It just sounds impossible. But quit putting people back where they were. Like,
Yep.
get them out of that area. And it's hard. Like if they have family, I guess that's a plus. But the majority of the people that have these issues have alienated their family so much that they're not even welcome back. That's the majority. That's in my experience. The majority of them, they're like, yeah, you hit rock bottom. You hit rock bottom because not only did you screw up everything in your life, but your family doesn't want anything to do with you, and that's a hard part. So when you get them to that point, there's got to be something in place that continues well beyond just getting them clean physically, because I think that's kind of what we lean on. Okay, you were in jail 60 days. It's shit's out of your system. Fair enough, but is it? The addiction part is still there. So how do we
Yeah.
fight that?
And that, I mean, that's like what you just said has been my experience as well. Is like, you know the addiction starts, at first they might be able to have a job, but then like, the addiction takes over. They're using all of their rent money, their car payments, whatever, for that addiction, because they're having to use more and more to get that same amount of high that they're used to. And then, especially with opiates, your body's physically going to go through withdrawals, so you're getting violently sick. And what I describe it is, think about the worst flu you ever got, where you have explosive diarrhea, you're vomiting, your stomach is in, just worse cramps, and you're going to go to 2 to 3 days of that if you don't use your drug. So, literally, every opiate addict that I met, every decision that they make has to do with, what do I need to do to get that next hit so I don't get sick. And so they start, maybe they move back in with mom and dad, and then they start pawning off mom and dad's valuables. They're master manipulators. They're lying about everything. They're deny. Then they eventually get kicked out. They're living on the streets. And then, like you said, a lot of times their family won't bring them back in, because maybe they've already brought them back in one, two, three times, and they're like, nope, not going to do it anymore. I've been fooled. And then they have nowhere to turn. I had one gal in particular that is one of the success stories, that I'm thinking of off the top of my head. And she was, I call it going down the rabbit hole, where she was just spiraling further and further down, and finally got her removed. She went to jail, and I was able to go in and see her, 2 3 days later,
Oops.
and she was able to think coherently, and I was able to have a conversation with her and actually say, like, hey, your kids are with CPS right now, they've been taken from you, do you want to be a mother to your children? And that was the first time that she could think coherently enough to be like, yes, I do want to do that. Okay, well, you're going to need to get clean. So then she was motivated to go to rehab, and she went to rehab out of the area, and she worked towards, and now has her kids back with her, and she's a productive member of society, and she's working with addicts to try to walk them through the same road she went down, but be there as a resource and a help to them. And that's, where I'm like, jail isn't the answer necessarily for addicts, but what it is a timeout for them to get sober, so they can actually think clearly, at least for a certain period of time, to decide, hey, do I want to get clean? And that's the unfortunate thing for us in Washington State, is we had drug court and it was working. And then when drugs got legalized by this piss poor decision by the state Supreme Court, drug court went away because no one was getting arrested for simple possession anymore. So there was no program in place for them to have some consequences where they went to treatment and they were able to essentially nullify or not get charged with a felony, and they were having success. And then when that went away, it just took one more system that we had in place to give addicts an opportunity to get clean. And it's still a work in progress. We don't have that back the way we had it before that ruling occurred.
Well, maybe this is where we start to brainstorm ideas because you gave me an idea. Maybe that's where we invest our money is recovering addicts.
Yeah.
We give them careers in helping. I know that exists already, but it only exists because you've got recovering addicts that wanted to come forward and say, "I want to help people."
Yeah.
Well, as an incentive for people to get clean and tell them like, "Hey, not only if you get clean, we got a career for you. We got a job for you at least for the next couple years to help others like that were in your position get clean." Maybe that's where we invest our money. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a couple programs out there. There's actually one out of Utah that I've heard about that we had a leadership training, and our instructor is named Dave Mather, and he teaches leadership all around the country for law enforcement. Just a great guy, but he went and saw this program in Utah where it's essentially like a halfway house, but you go in, and they call you a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Freshman year, you're living in house. You're working at. They got a couple businesses. I think they have like a thrift store and a moving company. And you're working, and then you're going to classes, and you're doing stuff in the house. Well, they partnered with banks and car dealerships, and so by your sophomore junior year, you've got an apartment. That money that you're making working for those businesses is going into a bank account, and you're establishing credit. You're getting your credit history back if your credit history sucks or got blown up in your prior life. And then by the time you graduate your senior year, you've got enough money for a down payment and a place to lay your head down at night, and then can continue to work for those businesses if you want, or you've got enough work history and a good credible resource that you're able to go out into the world and get another job. And like you hear stories like that and programs like that, and it's like, man, if we had more of those, I think we would have some more success. But the key piece of that is that's all community involvement. That's all banks, businesses, all taking a chance and being willing to work and partner with those programs.
I while we were chatting, I messaged Mark Lamb and Matt Thomas saying, "Hey, I'm talking with Chris Foreman, and we just talked about the border
Mm,
stuff." And they said Chris is good people, and they gave you a
oh,
thumbs up. So
very cool.
yeah. All right, sir. Let's let's hit the final stride here. I want to talk about combat first aid. So
Yeah,
let's try to transition. I'll let you lead the way because I don't know how to transition to that
sure.
from narcotics.
So we're gonna jump off the narcotics train and jump onto the SWAT train here. So um, I uh, consider it the Lord's plan.
Okay.
Me getting hired where I did, and I was single at the time. Was here about 1 month. I was on FTO. My FTO at the time was on the SWAT team, and I was invited for my FTO shift to basically observe. And I saw a cute blonde who was a paramedic. Uh,
What was his name?
yeah.
Ah, just kidding.
um, and so I didn't know anybody. Figured, hey, I got nothing to lose, and went up and struck up a conversation. And that ended up being my wife, Jen Foreman. So Jen happened to be there at that SWAT training because her and her boss, who was a former deputy for our sheriff's office, were trying to start a TAC med program for our SWAT team. So
Oh,
my
okay.
wife ended up getting essentially on the SWAT team because at the time our county was one of the leading counties in the entire state for illegal marijuana grows where we had Mexican nationals coming over here and they were doing live-in grows up in our mountains and wilderness. And so our SWAT team would task then when they would fly these and see them with our helicopter to go in and take them down and try to catch folks. So where I'm going with that is my wife was our TAC med on our SWAT team for 12 years. And during that time, she went to a lot of military based training, TCCC, went to International School of Tactical Medicine, and was going through training with some Navy SEALs and Army doctors and surgeons. And she started teaching us on the SWAT team TCCC based medicine, and she worked through all the same physical standards. She had to pass the PT test, uh, had to qualify, was armed and had a special commission as a TAC medic for our SWAT team. So fast forward, she gets basically hit up by one of our city agencies and says, "Hey, you know that law enforcement or that tactical medical training you're teaching to the SWAT guys? What do you think about doing a class for our patrol folks? Because we think they need this stuff too." And so that's how combat first aid was born. So Jen started basically teaching TCCC based medicine to cops for the amount it costs to get a babysitter for to watch our kids while she came in and taught. And she was doing her paramedic thing, and then doing this on the side. And what that morphed into was now I think it's been 5 or 6 years where she just teaches uh, TCCC based medicine, but adapted to law enforcement and what we do out on the street. And then that's morphed into rescue task forces for fire departments, churches, schools. So she's training teachers, she's training um, private security. And so we have, up to this date, trained over 7,500 law enforcement officers. We have over 100 documented saves of folks that went through our class that have either on duty or off duty rendered care, whether tourniquet application, chest seals, or wound stuffing. Some of those saves are officers that shot guys and then went up to them and threw a chest seal on them and saved their life. So it's my wife's passion. I'm also very obviously, uh, you know, see the value in it. And I'm just a guy that never liked blood. I didn't like medical calls, but recognized with my backup being 20 to 30 minutes out and my medical backup being a volunteer firefighter in a brush truck that I should probably know some of this stuff. And then once I knew it, it was like, hey, my partners need to know this stuff because if I'm unconscious, they need to know how to save my life. And so yeah, so I kind of teach the tactics portion on, we say we don't want to, we're not trying to turn you into paramedics or EMTs. We want you to do your cop stuff first. We want you to be, have the best officer safety, secure the scene, handcuff people we shoot, make sure the scene's safe, make sure there's no other threats that cause that mechanism of injury that still needs to be dealt with before we're going into the medicine. But basically recognizing that, if we have superior officer safety and we do the stuff we've been trained to do, and then we have the tools to save a life on scene before a lot of times even fire EMS get there.
I like it, man. If you're listening only to the podcast, you can find this webpage at combatfirstaid.com. So it's just like it sounds, combatfirstaid.com. And I'm just scrolling through the page. If you're a listener only, so you can go to our YouTube page, and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. If for some reason you can't find the website, but they've got the training, they've got gear, things, chest seals, tourniquets, things of that nature, all up on here, and basically everything that you would need. Now, I am a huge proponent for this type of training. Me being military, um, and in my own department, we have a TAC Med team, and this is exactly what our TAC Med team does: is they train us in all of this stuff every year. It's annual, and it's mandatory. So Whether my team alone, just before I did my military time, one of my guys slapped a chest seal on a guy, and he did not make it, but he would have been dead hours before had he not slapped a chest seal on him. So he gave that guy extra time. That guy actually gave us details of his case that helped to catch the guys that did what they did to him. But most importantly, gave him time to reach out to his family. So I don't know if he made contact. It wasn't that fully vested in the call, but just the fact that because of their training, they knew to throw the chest seal on, and it helped. And a chest seal is a more it's more rarely used, I think, than a tourniquet. We use, us as cops, tourniquet fixes everything.
Yeah.
You could have your toe got cut off. We're still using a tourniquet. It doesn't matter. So we'll tourniquet the leg.
No,
But
and I mean, and you get it coming from the military, but like, I mean, when I went through when I went through the police academy 20 years ago, what I was equipped with at a scene like that was the medics are coming. Hang
yep,
in there, the medics are coming. That was what I was equipped with when it came to medical training. And then we think about law enforcement and how it's evolved and how we're continually tasked to do more and more. And in Washington state, we are actually required, once the scene is safe, to render medical aid. So we are more and more tasks are being given to us as law enforcement. And the thing that I think is really important for folks to think about out there is, we've had numerous cases where, one in particular, officer is called to a guy walking down the middle of his city with a rifle. And, he shows up, has to take care of business, puts this guy down with his AR-15, walks up to the guy, obviously handcuffs him, and then pulls his chest seal out from behind his plate that was for him and puts it on this guy. That guy's transported to Harborview, which is our major medical center in Seattle. And the ER doc says, if this hadn't been put on this guy, he would have died. And fast forward 2 weeks, that officer gets a letter from that mentally disturbed person, which is what was happened. He was having a mental episode. And that family member writes a letter of thank you for saving that person's life. And that's again, humanizing the badge out there, right? Every person out there is someone's loved one. And that guy gets that letter from that mentally disturbed person's loved one thanking him for saving their life. And he said for him, knowing that he had that training, was able to put that on that guy, that he had, he didn't want to shoot that guy, but that's what needed to be done in the moment. But he was at home mowing his lawn the next day, or later that night, and he felt totally at peace about the whole situation because he knew he eliminated the threat. He took care of business, which needed to be done, and then at the same time, he saved the dude's life. And I think there's a piece of that where I think, essentially, when we first started teaching it, people were like, "What? I'm not helping anybody that just tried to take my life." But again, that's what we're called to now. That's what our society and the public demand. That's what they want. And
yeah.
so that's the decision that we have to make if we want to be in this profession, if we're willing to do that.
I think
Um,
that is what this profession is
yeah,
to me. I mean,
yeah,
there's no question.
yep,
I try to tell rookies, I'm like, listen, you need to take out the emotional investment in yourself. That because at the end of the day, that's what's going to wrap you up. If you get pissed off because this guy just tried to kill you, like, it is a very callous way, and I understand what I'm about to say. We are the good guy.
yep,
They are the bad guy.
yep,
That is their job.
yep,
So do your job. Your job's to be the good guy. So once business is taken care of, dust them off, pick them up, make sure they don't need any medical, and that's it. It
yep.
wasn't personal. It's
Right.
business.
It's business. Yep.
And it's the same thing if you do have to use deadly force. Take care of the threat, just like you said. Don't take it personal. It's hard to say, but that's why this is such a rare breed of a profession. We are a white collar profession with the requirements that we're supposed to have. We're supposed to be professors. We're supposed to be mechanics. We're supposed to be use of force with judo black belt experts. We're supposed to be animal control. We're supposed to be name whatever it is you want to name. Narcotics. We're supposed to know it all. We're supposed to know it by heart. People expect us to be able to just go off the top of the dome what law we've broken, all of that stuff, despite the fact that even a lawyer can't do that. So if that's the expectation, and that is what this job calls for, you cannot afford to let it get you wrapped up emotionally. You know whose job it is to let it get wrapped up emotionally? It's the public.
Yep.
I want my public to get outraged for me. That's who I need to get outraged for me. I need my chief, my sheriff. That's who I need to get outraged for me. My job's not to do that. I can't let myself get caught up in that. That's when we're the boots on the ground. That is where we need to keep the line. Is just let other people do that for us and trust that they will. And if they don't, well, that's the time to start figuring out, one, is this a good place for me? And two, is the person in charge are we doing the right thing for the community? Because a lot of times that's a reflection as well. If you're not doing a good job for the community, they're going to let you know because they're not going to get outraged for you. Where I'm at, I guarantee somebody shoots at me today, tomorrow, the public is going to have my back, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe I have a delusion on that. I don't know. But that's just the way I see things. So,
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm with you. I think 100% the silent majority is out there. They do have our back. They do come out when we have those major incidents. And you know, I think we throw the term professional out there, but like when you really think about like professionalism and being a professional and a master of your craft, like you said, that's what's professional is, hey, we're going to take care of business and do our thing, and we're not going to get emotionally caught up in it, invested. It's a day at work, and we're the good guys, and we're gonna do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons, and we're gonna save someone's life regardless of what they tried to do to us.
yeah. And if you're out there listening, you're an officer and you're just like, easy to say, tougher to do. I agree. It is.
Yeah.
It fucking is. But and especially when we're talking about cases that deal with children, there are tougher instances and examples. There are. That's why I try to. Honestly, I'm putting it out there. I try to avoid anything that involves kids. I have kids, and they're about the same age as yours. I have a 14 and an 11-year-old, about to be 12. Oh shit!
Yeah,
Truckers.
and I mean, I truly like guys that can do child crimes and child sex crimes. Like people come up to me and like, I don't know how you do narc work. I can never do narc work. That's the same thing I say to those guys that do that job. And like that is truly like doing God's work, man. Like you are the protector against pure evil,
Yeah,
and rescuing those kids and preventing future victims when you get those predators. I mean, that truly is like I want to support those guys. I want to help them. I would do whatever I want. But I'm like, man, to go to that place, I'm like, it's something like I just couldn't do. I couldn't go there.
yeah. You took the words right from my mouth. I was about to say the same thing. I'm like, I see guys that do narc. I see SWAT guys. I'm like, I'm glad you do that. I'm glad it's something you want to do because I can't do it. I can't be a SWAT guy. I can't. And as far as CACU, crimes against children units, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I just can't. I don't trust myself to do it unbiasedly. I don't trust myself to do it, as controlled as it needs to be. And it needs to be done very controlled. So, the guys that want to do that job, man, my hat's off to you. I commend you. I had, I can't remember his name. I just had a guy, from Pinell County, retired, but, we talked about cybercrime and, the stuff. I can't remember his name. My phone's on the floor, but anyway, yeah, it fell out of my lap. But I can't remember who it was. But it was a great. It was actually one of my more popular episodes because he sat down and we actually discussed like cell phones and the apps and stuff that are all like closeted pedophile shit and things of that nature that I've been a cop 17 years and I didn't know this stuff. So, hearing that was very informative. So glad we got guys like that out there because I don't have the mental capacity to handle it.
Yeah, no
and
doubt.
I've run across, I'm sure you have yourself run across crimes against kids, and you you're doing everything you can to not get emotionally invested and wrapped up, and just that alone is a fight in itself.
Yep.
But I don't have anything else, sir, that I personally want to hit. Is there something that we have not touched that you were like, I need to get this across?
I just like going back to the combat first aid piece, like just, I think we're at a place now where most officers at least have the opportunity to carry tourniquets and chest seals and combat gauze. Um, my agency recently started purchasing that for our department, but before that it was up to the individual officer to get that kit and get it on there. I think like in the last 5 years, part of our class used to be arguing with people or trying to get the misnomers about the dangers of tourniquets and how if you put a tourniquet on, you're going to lose your limb and all the things that, because for a while tourniquets were, portrayed as worst case scenario, don't use them. And to get people to convince that they are a useful tool, they do work. The evidence-based medicine coming from the military and overseas is they're safe and they're the right tool for the job, especially in our line of work out in the a lot of times in the middle of nowhere. I think the thing that I'm passionate about is when I see videos and we get a lot of there's just a lot out there as far as guys getting shot and having to run back to their car to get their IFAC kit, but
Yeah.
carrying that stuff on their person and then having the training and confidence to know how to use it because and I'm not like yes, it's my company. I'm passionate about, this subject, but like we the thing that I really appreciate and this is morphed over, 10 plus years where it was a 4-hour class in the classroom, then we were using mannequins and dummies to do bleeding control on and now we're actually, we've got moulage kits, we've got motorized backpacks that they wear that are remote controlled so we can have a limb bleeding and turn it on and off and make it as realistic as possible for the environment of law enforcement or rescue task force or a school shooting scenario, that kind of thing. But um, the thing that I think is just really important is this serves you well in life on duty and off duty because there could be a car accident that you come up to where someone has life-threatening bleeding from their limb and you might be the first one on scene and you know what to do and even if you don't have a tourniquet you could do well we call well-directed direct pressure but basically going to the point of bleeding and putting your fingers there and getting in that wound and stopping that wound from bleeding anymore and ultimately saving a life. And so I know kind of throughout the country it varies. I mean, we're still training agencies in the Northwest where they might have been given the tool and had like a 15-minute tutorial at the academy about a tourniquet, but they've really never dove down and they haven't practiced putting it on within, with any sort of frequency that they've got it loaded correctly. They've got if you're using a cat, they've got the time tab off to the side. It's out of the wrapper. I mean, just basic stuff. But when you see these videos of people under stress, they're constantly jacking it up. And so what I try to, encourage folks is just like you're doing your firearms training and your dry fire training and things that make you good at your job, practice and train these other things because if bullets are flying, blood's going to be pumping. And it's most likely, if it's not your blood, it's someone else's blood or your partner's blood. And you need to have those skills and those tools to know how to do it and have it on your person. And so that's just something that, I'm passionate about. I want to throw that out there. For most cops, it's probably like, yeah, you're speaking to the choir. I know this, but I do know there are contingents out there that just haven't had this training yet and they're behind the times. And seek out good training and seek out getting the equipment that you can carry on your person so you have it when you need it.
Yep. And in my experience, especially in a major city, There's 4 things specifically that you need to have all the time on your person: a tourniquet, an Israeli bandage, and know how to use one.
Yep.
That's probably the most used is the Israeli bandage. Some sort of quick clot bandage, so you can start packing wounds, and then the last one is a chest seal. So just because, like I said, the chest seal it's not needed a lot, but when it is needed, it's the only thing that's going to save whoever it is you're using it on. So, um,
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, I would, I would echo and stamp what you just said. And like the only other thing that I would say to that is, the national stats. And again, this is coming mainly from the military, but you're looking at military age males that are in shape, and they're even reporting 30% of lower extremity wounds require 2 tourniquets. So I carry 2. I've got
Oh,
one on. I have an exterior vest and I have one on my belt, because as we know, Murphy tends to show up and he
yep,
loves to play games with cops and try to screw us over. So being ready for that worst case scenario,
yeah,
um, is having 2, just in case you
yeah,
get that guy with a big thigh, or maybe you're that guy that's got big lower body,
yep.
and have that second one.
Yep. And don't be afraid to think outside the fucking box, guys. Like, you don't need to have a physical tourniquet that was designed to be a tourniquet. Like, strip your shoelaces, do whatever it takes. Like, if you put yours on, you're the only one there. Start thinking outside the box. Grab a twig, grab a shoelace, do what you got to do. Is it what's preferred? No. But damn it, you got to adapt, improvise, and overcome.
100%. And that's what we tell guys, like, hey, you can improvise one, you can make one. Worst case scenario, again, going back to Murphy's law, is you're by yourself. And
Yeah.
that's when your fine motor skills, you start losing consciousness after about 60 to 90 seconds. Uh, that's when you're like, okay, you got to have that tool that you're familiar with and know how to get it on quickly, 30 seconds or less before you start, losing, cognitive thinking, being able to focus on things, and you start going out. So, um, yeah,
Yeah.
equipment on your person is a big deal.
Yep. I agree. Well, Chris, I appreciate it, brother. How'd you have a good time?
I did. I thank you very much for the opportunity. Again, my passions in narcotics, I can talk and go down a lot of rabbit holes. I think we entered a few of those today, but just, yeah, really appreciate the time and the opportunity to come on your podcast and get to share the word out there that I'm passionate about, and then also just getting to hopefully educate some of my brothers and sisters in law enforcement that are maybe newer to the profession, and maybe there's a nugget they can take away from today that will help them in their career.
Awesome. So if you guys want to find Chris's website again, just one last time, it's combatfirstaid.com, and that's all spelled out. And if you're interested in the Washington State Narcotics Investigations Association, that is wsnia.org. So you can find them both there. But I appreciate it, brother, and I will talk to you later.
All right, thanks, Eric.